Here we are. Oh no, wait, echo.
There we go.
There we go. I can hear you. I
Sweet.
hear you loud and clear.
Sweet. How's it going, dude?
Um, it's going well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing
Happy
pretty good.
Sunday. Happy. Wait, isn't today something? Hold on.
Tomorrow is
Isn't it
Memorial
Father's
Day,
Day? Oh, okay.
and it's
Oh no.
today is Mother's Day in France. So you may
Oh, there we go.
maybe your your holiday barometer is set to France Celsius, and
It's
also
still
it's
set to
Mother's Day.
Europe, you know.
Yeah, you're like one of those like influencers who's like, oh, sorry, I keep ordering in German because I spent so long in Germany.
Oh,
Oops.
I'm just such a
Dankeschön.
such a
Oh, I mean,
worldly.
thank you. Sorry.
I'm a citizen of the world, really. So I order things in just the language that comes natural to me, which is every
Yes.
language actually, because
Which is actually,
I'm a
yeah.
citizen of the world.
I don't know if I mentioned it, but
Oh gosh, normal Senva, welcome. Lovely to see your face, Avery. Allergies are tough right now. I get it, but
allergies are
we're glad
brutal.
that you're here. Welcome, folks. Thank you for joining today's live recording session. It should be a fun one because we're doing things a little off the books. We like to sprinkle in the occasional, because we even we get tired of talking about Dune all the time,
Whoa,
and so we
whoa,
decided,
whoa.
well, yeah,
I
maybe I
wanted
shouldn't
to
speak for
wrap,
all of us.
I was going to say, I wanted to wrap talking about Dune in Ted Chiang. I want, this is my excuse to talk about
That's
Dune
true.
via Ted
That's true.
Chiang.
We are inevitably going to be talking a lot about Dune today, actually. Um, but the focus of today's recording session, Takako, hi, great to see you. Glad you're here. Glad you could make it. I actually brought it with me. I don't know why I brought a prop for an audio podcast, but maybe the folks on the live stream can see
Wait, let me
my
see this.
copy of Ted Chiang's Exhalation, which we will be talking about today. I'm very excited for that. It's a great book. Honestly, it's like one of my all-time favorite sci-fi books, like ever, period. So, and
There's
I
mine.
think you and I both feel strongly about it in a positive way. So I think today will be a delightful conversation.
Yeah, I also it is funny to see. I mean, we'll talk more about this, but like it is crazy like the things that are so resonant about Frank's writings, right? The kind of truths that his writings reveal about humanity and the sort of themes that are still relevant today. I see all of that true in Ted Chiang's writings as well. And I think that's where
Hmm.
a lot of people have pointed out that like sci-fi is the study of humanity as juxtaposed against XYZ. So there's a lot of that.
Yeah,
um yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see the overlap.
absolutely. It's a fun time. So y'all know the drill. If you're here at this live stream, I figure you've been here before. Um,
It's Caballo.
we have a
Hey.
script today. Hey, great to see you. Welcome. Also, look at this, gang. This is a new feature in StreamYard.
Whoa.
We can
Chat
put the
on
chat
screen.
up. Chat is right on screen, so all of your comments will be part of the permanent record.
How does that work with
Um,
like if we cut video, is that's on top of your video? Is that baked in?
you know, I have no idea. I
We'll
suppose
find
we'll
out, I
find out.
guess.
A learning moment. Yeah. If the social clips in a week about this episode have this chat on here, then
That's very funny.
lesson learned.
Lesson learned.
Ice
Surprise,
Crony
yours.
and
Yeah.
Thinnis, welcome. Oh, Thinnis says, nope, first time here. Oh my gosh, welcome
Welcome
to
first
your
time
first
here.
ever Comj live stream.
Surprise.
Very,
We'll
very
talk to you.
glad you could make it.
Hi.
Yeah.
How's it going?
So the game plan today, folks, is we have quite a lengthy script here in front of us. We wrote how many? 15 pages on Exhalation by Ted Chiang.
I mean, we held back a
So
little bit, yeah.
we held back. Truly, this is 15 pages of us holding back other feelings and thoughts. But there's already plenty to talk about today. We're going to be working our way through the script, recording it for release next week. But of course, we want you to be a part of the conversation as well. So don't hesitate to drop your thoughts, comments, questions in the live chat. And when it's appropriate, we will occasionally throughout the episode respond to your comments and questions. And so you can be a part of today's episode and help us shape the conversation as we go.
Indeed.
And the only requirement today, I suppose, is make sure you've read Exhalation.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true. Because
it's
it's
a
one
great
of those
book.
things. It's great, yeah. And it's We are going to be talking about what happens in each story, and there are some like twists. Um, but you know,
Some
at the
really
end of the
great
day,
twists. Yeah.
you're the master of your fate.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm ready to get started if you are.
Yeah,
I did
we
all
need
of
an
my
intro.
pre-recording rituals. We need a little intro here.
I was thinking
Today
grab
on the
bag,
show.
like we're stepping through a portal in time. We're pushing the button a second before the light goes on. Things like that.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I was thinking too.
All we need
Also,
is nine
also in the chat,
28
folks,
seconds.
let us know if there are any audio issues. If I'm too loud, if I'm too
Yeah, yeah.
quiet, if something's wrong with the audio, let us know so that we can fix it. We want you to be able to hear us clearly. Today on the show, our
Yeah, normal
nanny.
Senva. Embraced short story collections this year. Easy to way to get that. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of reading. Feeling without digesting a saga. No kidding. That's so intimidating about like starting something like Akator or like or the Sanderson books or Wheel of Time. It's like, do I want to commit to reading a book and doing a lot of reading? But then people go, "How many books have you read?" And you go, "One." And it's like, yeah, but it was like 4,000 pages long. So, come on, give me a break. Maybe wondering what our paraselves are up to. Oh,
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to work in a paracel.
yeah, paraself. Listen, Roman Cavallo, listening to Stormlight archives right now. Even that is taking forever. Yeah, no kidding. That's so funny. What a long
Yeah,
listen.
yeah. Folks who have listened to um, my other podcast, Science Fiction Book Club, know my most scorching hot take that makes Opsa, my co-host on that show, like makes his skin crawl, is that most of the time I will only ever read the first book in a series and then utterly drop the series. I like
Mm,
never move on from book one for like most series, and it's rare for me to commit to something like Stormlight or yeah, anything that's like that much.
that's so
Wheel
funny.
of Time is like a my mountain that I'll never be able to climb because it's too much of a commitment.
Avery, it's been 5 years and I still haven't finished this book I got in 2020. What book? Did you say? You didn't say. What book? Is it the Holy Bible, King James edition? Is it To Be a Master, the Pokemon collecting coloring book?
Did you say King James Bible?
Who's to say? I haven't finished that book either.
Okay, so maybe something like that. It's a bit long, but we can just kind of riff on it for intro stuff.
That's true. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Although Paraselves, what are we doing here? Paraselves, selves,
Oh, yikes.
Paraselfs.
Oh
Hey, A
boy.
Beautifully
Hello.
Foolish Endeavor by Hank Green. I read. Wait, Hank Green books.
Right, he did Anthropocene Review and Turtles All the Way Down, right?
That's
That Hank
John
Green?
Green.
Oh.
Hank Green,
Whoops.
his brother, did an absolutely remarkable thing and A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. But A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor was the sequel to the first one, right? I think I read both of those, and they were good. They were fun. I didn't know they were sci-fi until it's like a third of the way through the first one. Um, I like Hank Green a lot. He's cool. Uh, Common thing, Abu. Don't worry. Yeah, I mean, they are literally the Vlog brothers, so
Yeah.
they are confused frequently.
Yeah.
And yeah, Turtles all the way down. Paper towns. Paper. Anyway. Okay. Cool. You ready to get kick this off?
Yes, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Sweet. God, I feel like it's been months since
It's
we
been a
recorded an
while. I
intro.
feel a little rusty. We did a bunch of like D&D recordings for those D&D episodes y'all have been listening to. And so it feels we haven't done like a traditional episode in a while. So Anyway, so excuse us if we're a bit rusty today. There might be a lot of stop and go. Today on the show, our nanny told us not to press that predictor button, but we didn't listen. So now, dear listener, you get to hear our paraselves talk about Exhalation by Ted Chiang instead of Dune.
What?
But I know, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Don't
yeah.
worry. There's still going to be a lot of Dune talk because the truth is
Yeah.
every version of ourselves in every parallel reality is going to be obsessed with Dune. That's just a constant.
Yeah. Global weather patterns had no effect on how obsessed
Doesn't
with Dune
matter.
we were.
Yeah. Butterfly effect, get out of here. We still love Dune.
Yeah. I went backward 20 years and then I told myself, get fucking interested in Dune right now. It's great. Went forward 20 years, also obsessed with Dune. It's crazy. Yeah.
The past is immutable. You can never change it, okay?
I'm immutably obsessed with Dune. As God wills, you know?
Great.
Great. Okay. Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name is Leo.
And my name's Abu.
Oh, and today on the show, we are not exactly talking about Dune, but Abu,
but
we're always talking about Dune.
We're always, right.
That's our thing. That's what we're into.
That's our thing. Even when we're not talking about Dune, it's about Dune. Just think about it.
Yeah, just think about it. That's how I get away with it with my close family and friends. They go, "What do you want to talk about?" I'm like, "Dune," but we're going to talk about something else to talk about Dune. Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
It's always a metaphor.
Today, we're talking about the book Exhalation by Ted Chiang. And this is, I mean, again, anybody who's read the book knows this is an excellent collection of short stories. And realistically, the reason we're talking about it is because we are right now between Heretics of Dune, our book club, and Heretics of Dune. That's done. And we are basically killing time until we kick off our Chapter House book club.
That's
and
right.
so in this kind of interim, what do? It's been a age-old question as long as this podcast has been around. The idea was floated by our patrons that we talk about Ted Chiang. So here we are. Yeah, we like to get experimental in this like slow period in between book club series. Like book clubs take up a lot of our time and it's a lot of work. Yeah.
So we usually don't have time to be flexible and experimental with the types of things we create. So when we have a lull in between books, we like to try weird things like the D&D series y'all have been hearing on the feed lately. We have a really excellent audio drama that I'm very excited for folks to hear coming up. We adapted one of our favorite chapters from God Emperor into like a cinematic audio drama you'll get to hear in a few weeks. And today, here we are talking about what I consider to be like one of the pinnacles of sci-fi, honestly, like one of the best contemporary sci-fi novels of all time, short story collections of all time.
Yeah, completely agreed. I had a friend turn me on to Ted Chiang at one point. And again, there's crossover here too, because naturally, and you'll mention this later, but Villeneuve, before he did Dune, did Arrival, and Arrival was based on a Ted Chiang short story. And
that's right.
I think for people who encounter Ted Chiang's writings, there's also clear overlap. And I don't know
For sure.
how much Ted Chiang. Maybe let's try to get Ted on the show. Let's see if we can.
I would love
get
to
him.
get Ted on the show. He seems to look quite introverted as a person,
Oh,
but
no.
I think we could get to him.
I mean, aren't we all? Aren't we all? at the end of the
Send
day?
him a little voice note, something soft and sweet.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Hey, Ted.
Hey, Ted. Hey, Ted.
Okay, we're getting off track. All right, let's take care of some housekeeping. Now we're just hitting on Ted Chiang.
I mean,
Let's
that
get
was my goal
some
today.
housekeeping. Let's take care of some housekeeping before we dive into this short story collection and work our way through all 9 of the excellent stories in this book. Obviously, as a spoiler warning up top, folks, we highly, highly, highly recommend that you have actually read Exhalation by Ted Chiang in its entirety. We are going to be talking about all of it today, so consider this a spoiler warning for the whole book. We also gently and sort of softly recommend that you're caught up with the book club episodes, I would say, because we will be making many references and connections to ideas in the Dune novels that we have talked about at length over the course of those book club series. So I would recommend that you've at least read up to wherever we are in the book club at the moment you're listening to this. And to put a real, um, and to give you an anchor point if you need one, I would say make sure you've read the first 4 books, at least through God Emperor of Dune.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. Now, as always, we want to thank our patrons who make all of this possible. So a huge, huge shout out to our Quisatz Hatterack level patrons, Daniel Dion and Seth Redengreer.
Woo!
Folks, you are, oh, what's the bit?
If you could send money through Prisms, Daniel and Seth's Paraselves would also be supporting this podcast.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean,
We'd have
listen,
like
your
infinite
generosity-
Kwisatz Haderach level patrons because it would just be Daniel and Seth infinitely over and over again from every
and
parallel
then in
universe.
every other parallel universe, those podcasts don't have any support. We're like, tough shit,
right,
dog.
they're just supporting this one. We're the prime.
This one, we're the prime universe. That's how I treat myself every morning. I go, "You're the prime Leo." Yeah. But of course, our para thank you extends to all of our para patrons at every level, in every universe, in every dimension, who make this show
Indeed.
possible. It is not an exaggeration to say that your support literally makes doing this possible. So thank you.
Truly.
And if you're not in a place right now to be a monthly supporter on Patreon, don't forget we have a one-time tip option through Buy Me a Coffee. That link is in the show notes as well. So if you prefer to just give us a bit of support, send that money through that prism because you're a dying old lady. You don't like your son anymore.
That was so
Send
funny.
us some money. That was very funny.
Right. I don't like that son either.
Yeah, he seems like
This gun-toting son. I get it. I understand the old lady.
Yeah.
Okay, clearly we're chomping at the bit and cannot wait to get into this book. The game plan for today is very simple, folks. We will be hitting on some brief, very, very brief overviews and summaries of each of these books, just as a refresher in case it's been a minute since you've read the book. And then we will be sharing our thoughts about all 9 of the short stories contained within this excellent book. And then at the end, just for funsies, we will be power ranking our top 3 picks of the 9 stories in this.
Yeah.
What are our top 3 and why? We will be going through that. But of course, all throughout today's conversation, this is a Dune podcast. We can't help but talk about Dune. We will be connecting many of the ideas and themes found in these short stories with ideas and themes that we've discussed in Frank's works.
Indeed.
So all of that and more, but mostly all of that, coming up after a quick break. Stick around, folks. We will see you in just a minute to talk about Exhalation by Ted Chiang. All right, all of that and more, but mostly all of that is happening right now. Let's do it. Let's jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your break. Hope you're ready for all of that and more, but mostly all of that. Let's kick off our conversation about this book with the first story, seems appropriate, called
Indeed.
The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate.
I love it.
So just to kind of briefly summarize this story, this is set in a mythical Baghdad. It follows a merchant, Fuad ibn Abbas, who encounters a time-traveling gate built by an alchemist and inventor. The narrative unfolds through nested stories of others who have used the gate. The whole story is him talking to the Caliph, going, hey, this is what's happened to me and what's led to this moment. And it is very funny how often it's like, and then I asked him why, and he said, well, let me tell you a story, and I'm going to tell you the story he told me. It's stories within stories within stories, the whole way down.
That's right.
Each of those stories emphasizes a central idea that you can use these time-traveling gates or even these time-traveling portals to observe or even participate in the past and future events, but you cannot change fate. You cannot change time. So it's ultimate determinism. And why is the time portal here? Because it was always going to be here. And do I step through or do I not step through? Well, you always step through or you didn't. And that's why it led to this moment, right? Lots of those moments. Time is immutable. God's plan is immutable.
Right.
Now, after some cautionary tales of other clients, the alchemist tells these stories of, hey, there's this guy who did this and this other person who did that.
Right.
Fuad travels to the door of years in Cairo so he can go back 20 years. And his hope against hope is that he can save his wife who died tragically 20 years ago, to see if
Right.
he can save his wife from her untimely and tragic
Right.
demise.
And who wouldn't
Now,
hope that if they
of
came across
course,
a time traveling gate?
it's one of those things, or at the very least, change something, and I think his hope is maybe, you know, I don't know, maybe it's like he saw the body, he heard she died, but actually she was whisked away to the future, and or something like that. He has these unfounded hopes, but of course,
Yeah,
it's trauma. He's still broken inside, right?
absolutely.
Now, as it turns out, as the alchemist warned, the past is immutable, and she dies again. His
Hmm.
journey to Baghdad to see her is delayed and delayed and delayed. It's as if God's hand itself is delaying him, but he gets there. She's died. Nevertheless, he's able to receive a message from her. An attendee said, "Hey, she had a message for her husband." Ironically, he hadn't gotten that message as a young man, probably because he, as an old man, was told the message instead. Uh, Nevertheless, he is very happy to have gotten that message, and
Right.
it
Right.
is, as he says with the alchemist, you may not be able to change things, but you may know the past better, or you may know more
Right.
about the
And
past.
that may change your perspective of things.
Right.
Right.
And that's the
Beautiful
story.
stuff.
And he's presenting this story to the caliph, going, "This is why my claims are extraordinary, and this is why I'm here. Now the ball is in your court. What do you want to do, Mr. Caliph?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
uh, and that's the story. So Abu, talk to me. What did you think of this story?
Uh,
Yeah, how'd it land for
oh
you?
my gosh. I like spoiler warning. This is all. This is a top three story for me from this book. Not to
Oh my
spoil
God,
my power
power
ranking from
ranking
later.
off the top. All right, sure.
Right off the top, I'm just gonna be like, yeah, man, this is in my top three. I love this short story. It is so beautiful. There is so much respect for Islamic and Eastern culture and traditions in this story. Um, it's sad, it's beautiful, it's touching, there's a wonderful message here of accepting the events of your life and being able to appreciate them, not just the good, not just the happy moments, but the bad and the okay and the scary, and understanding that like that is life. Life is full of many shades of moments, ranging from joy to pure tragedy and everything in between. And just the message of this story, you might look at this and go, oh man, like a time travel story where the time travel does nothing.
Yeah,
Like,
on
you're telling me
paper,
my
that's
fate
rough.
is decided. Should I just give up and not do anything because my choices have already been locked in?
Yeah,
That's not the message of this story. Instead, it's a beautiful and poignant observation about how you are experiencing your life every moment at a time. And it's only in looking back on your past and quote unquote revisiting it through a different lens or reconsidering your original assumptions are you able to more fully appreciate the life that you have lived. It's beautiful. I want to share one of the quotes from this story that really struck me. Quote, and this is a bit of a thesis for this story as well.
mm,
Quote, past and future are the same, and we cannot change either, only know them more fully. My journey to the past had changed nothing, but what I learned had changed everything. And I understood that it could not have been otherwise. If our lives are tales that Allah tells, then we are the audience as well as the players, and it is by living these tales that we receive their lessons. End quote.
that's so beautiful. Yeah,
So beautiful. So I loved everything about this story, the characters, the setting, the message of it. I'm a bit of a sucker for like a time loop story. I love a time travel tale,
yeah,
regardless
yeah,
of
yeah.
which direction or how it interprets time travel.
Yeah.
Um, and I want to call out this went over my head the first couple times I read the story, but on a reread, you realize, oh, at the beginning of the short story, Baghdad is a prosperous and powerful city. And you realize that it's that because Fuwad is talking to the Caliph 20 years ago. Fawad, who knows everything that's going to happen for the next 20
Yeah,
years
yeah,
and
yeah.
can act as the perfect advisor to the Caliph to help Baghdad thrive.
That's so cool.
So,
Great
so
detail.
in it,
Yeah.
that loop closes in on itself once you realize that part of the story. It's never stated, overtly, but I fully believe that that's the intention with Baghdad being a beautiful city and Fawad talking to the Caliph 20 years ago in the past. Is I think Fawad chooses to stay and do what he can for the city of Baghdad and help the Caliph rule and help the city thrive and become the powerful, legendary city it is at the start.
Yeah.
What about you, though?
Yeah.
What did you feel about this first short story in the book?
I mean, just agreed on all accounts. I think like what an excellent start to the book. Great choice, editorial choice to put this at the top of the book because like Dune, it defies so many expectations. It doesn't feel like sci-fi, but we're talking
No,
about
no,
time travel, we're talking about this sort of like adjacent to reality technology, the alchemist who makes the thing. He explains how he like widens the holes in time space gently like a glass blower and it's like okay,
sure,
sure.
I'm in.
Like, yeah, great. You know, so it's funny. Like you buy this book and you go, oh, I've heard he's a great a great sci-fi author. And then the first book is based in this like Middle Eastern story, and it's like it's
Yeah,
so brilliant for that reason. I
right.
I also in particular
The
like
the tone is like Arabian Nights, It's very like
yeah,
steeped in like mythology and fantasy rather than
yeah.
like hard sci-fi.
Even the tone has this like and the way that the characters kind of explain themselves and the way that the narrative unravels feels very like a parable or like a story
Yes,
from a religious text. It's so cool. I love it, and
absolutely.
it's so
Yeah,
unique. I also one of the kind of things that I want to say across all of these stories is they all have a very like unique feeling to them. I It's almost hard to feel where Ted Chiang's style starts and ends because he's so good at writing
oh
these
yeah,
different styles. But also that's very like Dune, right? Like I think for a lot of people who read Dune, you're out in the desert with the Fremen and everything's names based in Arabic, right? And like just the amount
yep,
of Arabic that's present on Arrakis and in the Dune universe, we start to see some analogs there. But I also want to point out, I think I really appreciate how Paul, who struggles and bumps up against the immutability of time once perceived, right? The future is open and it's this mystery, and that's the benefit of it. The problem is if you have a prescient being seeing the future, you have now locked down that future. And we more or less know that's the way it works in Dune, is like Paul looks too closely at the reality of Chani dying, so there's no chance of Chani not dying. And
yeah,
there we see some of the similarities here. And granted, in this story, in this first story by Ted Chiang, it's God's plan. In Dune, it seems a little bit more like an atheistic story where there isn't sort of a main creator kind of guiding everyone's decisions. Nevertheless, we still have this kind of uh, theme of once time is perceived, once time has been sort of laid out on its timeline, there's really no changing it.
right.
I also really appreciate that, and we're kind of joking about it with the time holes and the glass blowing, but like realistically, I appreciate that Ted Chiang doesn't get wrapped up in too much trying to explain how the time travel works and how the gate
Yeah,
works. He just goes, this is how it was demonstrated. He explained it. I didn't really get it, but here's how it works. And then you just move on and we focus on the very human desire to reverse a thing that's happened and to see someone you love, right? And like that's the core of the story. So also in a way that I felt was very similar to Frank's writings, it's like, what exactly are Alia's powers? Who's to say? But isn't it scary to think about being lost to possession, an
yep,
abomination? Like,
yep,
I like this idea of we focus on what's important. We don't get wrapped up in the technology or the exact how and why. We just focus on the people at the core of the story and how they're affected by all of these things. So
yeah,
I really enjoyed that. Again, great story overall, very, very, very strong story, and excellent introduction to what not to expect when going into a sci-fi short story collection. You're like, oh
Right.
shit, maybe I should get rid of all my expectations. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Takako makes a great call out here as well. Takako writes, I enjoyed how the characters used time period / culture specific metaphor to describe time travel.
Yeah, that's huge.
And I actually think Ted Chiang is excellent at doing this because this comes up in a later story with Jijingi and Fact of Feeling, Fact of Fiction, where they talk about writing in a way that's very
Truth of fact, truth of feeling.
truth of fact, truth of fiction.
I was like, that you. I mean, you said what was true. You didn't say what was accurate.
There we go. Exactly.
That's the true title.
I do believe this is one of Ted Chiang's superpowers. He can make the characters feel like they absolutely belong in that story. None of them are jarringly like using modern lexicon in a story that's supposed to be set in like mythical ancient Baghdad. Great call out, Takako.
I also
Okay.
I think there's also this element too of like I started getting a sense of maybe the very real benefit that having a god figure or this like externalized force can be for people. And this may be like obvious to most people, but I was raised in effectively an atheistic household within Tibetan Buddhism, and like we don't really have an external thing. So a lot of a feeling of peace with the way things are comes from internal introspection and kind of looking at the way that you interact with things, and that's sort of where a lot of it comes from for me. But the idea of like Paul sees his inability to control things as in this sort of cynical defeatist way. You say, well, I can't do anything, what's the point? And we see in this story multiple times characters bumping up against the limits of what they can change, and they go, well, then that's God's plan. And there's a relief there of, well, he's in charge. And I got a very visceral feeling of that in this story that I thought was quite beautiful. It's a little alien to me, but like
Yeah.
the idea of having that externalized thing, maybe even the sort of thing that Leto to Atreides becomes, saying, I'm going to remove myself from humanity so everyone can point to me and say, well, he's got a plan. I'm
Yeah.
going to become the God Emperor. That's something I felt in the fabric of this story that was very
Good call out.
was interesting to me. And
Right.
again, not familiar to my day-to-day experience for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. A sort of acceptance of your life's events, which is very central to the themes and ideas of this first story.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about story number 2. This one is the titular Exhalation.
Oh,
And oh my God, this one is also a banker. So to very briefly summarize it and refresh your memory to your listener, Exhalation is a short story where we follow this mechanical being who lives in some sort of sealed world. This mechanical being is a scientist and a researcher, and it dissects its own brain to try and understand how memory works. Through the process of dissecting its own brain, it discovers that its universe, its enclosed, sealed universe, is slowly running out of air pressure.
right.
And air pressure is the life force of the beings in this universe.
Yeah.
Entropy, basically. It's a one long allegory for entropy. And this is an astonishing book. The being figures out basically like the nature of its own consciousness. Like it unlocks its brain and begins to realize like which parts of its brain and the physical mechanisms are actually where memory resides, and
Right.
is able to solve the issue, for example, of why when one of these mechanical beings, quote unquote, dies, their memory dies with them.
Right.
It isn't just like cataloged in some hard drive in their brain.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful stuff. And again, like a really beautiful sort of metaphor for how human brains and how human memory and how human stories are saved, but can also be lost. The story also sorry, let me back up. The story also zooms out from that point and focuses on how these discoveries about memory and about how the life force is being drained from this universe affects society. And basically how society begins to contend with its own mortality. Because for these beings in this universe, time is literally running out. Time is literally slowing down on their clocks because of
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
the air pressure in their universe is changing. There's incredible quotes all throughout this short story. There's a couple we want to share here. This first one, quote, "Our every utterance will reduce the amount of air left for thought and bring us closer to the moment when our thoughts cease altogether. Will it be preferable to remain mute to prolong our ability to think, or to talk until the very end? I don't know." End quote.
God damn it.
Chills.
It's
Just
so good.
chills.
Yeah. And then it just moves on from that quote. It like drops that. And then it's like, anyway, back to the story. And I'm like,
Right.
"Ah, what? It's so good."
Incredible stuff. The story ends on a beautiful note as well, because it's revealed that our narrator, this scientist who did the brain surgery on itself, is writing all of this down for some hypothetical future explorer who may come upon this universe long after these beings have gone extinct because of the
Right.
air pressure. And the story ends on just this incredibly beautiful call to action for these explorers. Quote, "Contemplate the marvel that is existence and rejoice that you are able to do so. I feel I have the right to tell you this because as I am inscribing these words, I am doing the same." End quote. Like, I'm getting emotional just reading that. That's
Yeah. When we talk about like an author writing something with an intent to pass along a message, a couple of times in this book, I get a sense of like, this is Ted Chiang going, just fucking take a second and appreciate how great it is to live and how great it
yeah,
is to be alive. Like, for all of the chaos and all of the bad stuff and all the stuff that we have to reckon and think about, like, appreciate the very baseline of thinking and being.
yes. Yeah.
It's brilliant. It's great.
It's a brilliant story and a brilliant message. What were your thoughts on it, on this one, Leah?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, just to shout out a couple of comments that we're getting. Normal Senva says, "Should we live for a long time or a good time?" With providing an answer to the question, a good time, uh, as well, which is excellent. And it's true. You know, I think so. I goddamn love this story. I think this story is
Yeah.
spectacular. It also occurs to me as I was rereading it. This for sure, by the way, is one of the stories that years after reading this book for the first time, I was still thinking about occasionally. I like that steampunk universe of the scientist
Mm-hmm.
dissecting his own brain, and the moment when he realizes that with the mirrors effectively locked in place, seeing the room from this external position, brain expanded, arms and movements being recreated with these mechanical arms, he has a moment of going, "Am I the room? Like, is
Right.
is my consciousness now the room, or am I the body?" And that gets to a very cool, I think oftentimes when we start looking at baseline consciousness in Western civilization, we think that our consciousness is fully in our heads, but in other cultures, consciousness is elsewhere. And the idea of my hand, I hurt my hand, this is my hand. It's not me, but it's my hand. This is the hand I own. The question of where does
Mm-hmm.
where does identity begin, start and stop, and where
Yeah.
do where do we where do we create those vacuum sealed bubbles around consciousness? It's all very cool, and that this story stuck with me for a long time. But rereading it, I really appreciate that this story asks thought provoking questions. This story asks more questions than answers it provides, and I really appreciate that in stories. Like when you ask really meaningful questions that guide us toward appreciating the life we live, appreciating what does it mean to live, right? To Normal Senva's quote, right? Like, should we live a long time? Should we be focusing on expanding the number of years we have on this planet, or should we be focusing on providing the best quality of life for the most people? And like, what is the goal? And I think we
Yeah.
can get lost in just developing technology for technology's sake, or developing the sciences for science's sake, or develop whatever. The call to action to remind ourselves of why are we here and what are we doing is the point. To speak to one another is the point to the exchange, and should we talk to the very end, or should we allow ourselves to become these sort of hermits of meditation and isolation, connected to life supporting machines in our little hospital rooms. Like, what
Yeah.
is the sort of future we want for ourselves? And then how does that
Yeah.
affect our decisions today? It's excellent. I'm a huge fan of like steampunk and like that sort of
Same.
aesthetic. That universe, I love it. The idea of these gold foil brains that have these like flipping mechanisms, and the state of identity is the exact moment that the certain like circuits of air and air pressure are created. I thought that was incredible. Like, the machine is the air, the machine isn't the gold foil. I was like a kid in a candy shop having a great
Yeah.
time. And besides, fucking okay, Doris Balat writing journals for future people to read and reflect on. This is so Dune coded. Are you kidding me?
It
Like,
is very Dune coded. Even
oh
the central message that like appreciate and marvel at existence, and that you are able to do so, um, because nothing lasts forever.
what is your noble purpose, Benny Gesserit?
That's one of the central ideas that Paul has to struggle with in Messiah.
Yeah,
That on a long enough timeline, nothing is forever.
right.
On a timeline of infinity, of every future possible, everything will eventually fade and die out in sort of a natural cyclical way. I think this story touches on that idea as well,
1,000%.
because the message is for these explorers who may come into this universe and see an extinct universe, but they're coming in hypothetically because their own universe is dying and they're trying to find a solution by going to another one. Like,
Right, right.
it's this idea that like our universe died, yours will also die. Appreciate everything while it's there. And like you're saying, decide what matters most to you while you still have it, because it won't be there forever.
Yeah,
I think instead of being a sad and tragic message, it ends up actually being a really touching one.
yeah, completely agreed. And I'm already hearing some of what you think about it, but broadly, what did you think of this story? You hated it, I
I
guess?
loved it. I loved it. I honestly, like, we only shared two quotes, but if if I could have just read this short story to everyone, I would have, because like this is maybe some of the most beautiful sci-fi writing I've ever read. Just in these couple of pages of this short story. I agree with you completely. The steampunk aesthetic, the fact that this universe doesn't feel like it needs to explain itself. At no point does Ted Chiang be like, "Oh well, like air and it's like robots and it's a whole thing, but don't worry."
Are they
It's like,
underground? Are they
are
like,
right. The
yeah,
story just goes
yeah,
and is like, hang in there. Like, you're in for this ride. They're
yeah,
in a universe. It's enclosed. Don't worry about it. Gold
yeah,
threads,
yeah,
air
yeah.
pressure, and at first it's a little jarring. You start the short story and you're like, what is going on?
Right.
Because none of it makes sense. But it's written so beautifully, and the world building is handled so delicately that you as the reader are just along for the ride, and suddenly you're deeply invested in this. You pointed out a couple of moments in the brain surgery that affected you. That entire scene just gripped me and didn't let
Yeah.
go.
Oh, a
Like, it
thousand
was
percent.
so visceral. The brain
Yeah.
surgery scene itself is so visceral and so well written. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I rarely, I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I have a hard time like visualizing what I read. I don't like
Yeah.
see people's faces and stuff when I
Sure,
read.
sure, sure.
I like vividly visualize this brain surgery scene in my
Yeah.
head just because of the way it's written. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, because at any moment you're like, oh my gosh, you're gonna damage yourself.
Crack
You're
something,
doing
your
brain
brain
surgery on
turns
yourself.
off. Yeah.
You're right. It's all very delicate. A beautiful scene, a beautiful story. I loved it, start to finish. One of my favorites, for sure.
I think what in particular Ted did a great job of outlining the stakes for this scientist. Like, the scientist acknowledges this is risky. Multiple times he
Yes.
goes, "Am I even right now making rational decisions? Have I damaged my brain in some way? Can I make rational
Yes.
decisions?" to the best of my ability, I was able to do some
Right.
calculations. I
It's a
can
little
do,
like wink, wink, like unreliable narrator, maybe.
yeah,
Like,
who's to
uh,
say?
who's to
And
say?
but
Ah,
also
so
like,
good.
and then I arranged a colleague to come meet me at my office in 7 days just in case I die on the operating table so
Oh
that
my
someone
God.
finds my body. It's like the the number of ways that Ted very gently says, here are the stakes and what's going to happen. Right, like this story stuck with
Yes.
me. The same for you. I thought about every little sentence. I was like, oh my god, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant stuff.
Brilliant. A great one.
God damn it.
An iconic one, dare I say. I'm trying to avoid saying iconic because people keep calling me out for like overusing iconic, but truly, folks, iconic.
This is iconic. Iconic thing to say, Abu. What an iconic comment. Well, okay. So that's exhalation. I also wrote in the script titular, and I'm realizing it might there's another word, eponymous, the eponymous
Mm.
story, the one after which something is named. And then I deleted it and was like, I should use smaller words generally. Anyway, okay, let's talk about our third story. This one's quick. The third story in the book is called What's Expected of Us. And it's written by, it looks like Paul Atreides. No, it's someone else. Chiang, it looks like. This manages to potentially, depending on how you feel about it, fuck up your day in just a couple of pages. It's like
Oh,
three
yeah.
pages long. And it's a very brief tale about a device called the Predictor or a Predictor. You buy one, it's very fun. It's kind of a novelty tool. And the idea is it's sending it's like a quantum time signal. When you push the button, it sends the signal back in time a second, and the light will go on a second before you push the button. So
Yep.
the light on this little box with a button and a light, the light will always go on 1 second before you push the button, and there's no way to trick it. There's no way to get around it. You can't double fake it or whatever. Very simple little thing. And as the story points
Yes.
out, initially some people are like, "Oh, that's kind of fun." But then it sets
Right.
in what it's demonstrating, which is that
Uh-oh.
we don't have free will. And there's this basically that free will is an illusion. And in particular, although people had always kind of talked about this and maybe even decided it, right? Like I think about, I watch quite a few, um, physicists and science communicators. And there's a number of them who are like, the more I've studied physics and chemistry and neurology, the more I don't really believe in free will. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. But I think we all live necessarily, we all live with the sort of illusion of, I definitely believe that I have the ability to choose. The problem is with this predictor tool is that it gave in this universe people solid evidence that they did not have a choice about when they were going to
Right.
push the button. And this leads to many people falling into effectively waking comas where they don't make
Mm-hmm.
any new decisions. And a number of people lose the ability to act. Some people seem relatively unaffected. But at the end, the narrator urges readers to just pretend. Just pretend
Yeah.
you have free will. That's the secret. But then he acknowledges, it doesn't actually change anything because you either will be affected or you won't. So why should I send
Right.
this warning? Well, because I didn't have a choice, right?
I inevitably had to.
I had to. I was the person to
There's
send the
no
warning.
free will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So it's huge. I mean, the illusion of free will is necessary for mental well-being. Fascinating preposition. And again, this story starts and stops in a matter of pages. It's crazy. Great time. What did you think, Abu? How did this not that you have any choice in how you felt about it, not that free
Yeah.
will exists,
Yeah.
but how are we going to pretend you chose to feel?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I have no choice but to love this story. Oh my God.
I'm sensing a
So
pattern.
good.
Oh no.
Yeah, truly a pattern here. Um, in just 3 pages, it's the kind of story that makes you know that meme where the guy like sits up in his chair and people use it for like I locked in when this happened in Dune Part Two or whatever. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
me. Like I was reading this and I got to the end and I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I need to not read anything for the rest of the day because I
Yeah.
can't.
Oh my gosh, true.
Um, And to be able to do that in 3 pages is like a superpower, right? Like, my God. I loved this story. I also loved its central message. You know, like, it's clear all of these short stories, as you stated, Ted Chiang is trying to get some sort of message across, or to explore the human condition in some way. Maybe not provide answers, but to provide thoughts and feelings. I loved the
Thoughts
message
and
of this.
prayers.
Thoughts and prayers, truly, for for some cases. I loved this. I loved the idea that, like, whether or not free will does or does not exist within our universe, in order for you to live your life, just pretend it does.
Yeah.
That's in fact the only way you will be able to live your life, is to just pretend. And in this case, it's okay to just pretend, because that is what will keep you sane. The I want to read the final lines of this story. Again, if we could just read these 3 pages to you, we would. But
Yeah.
these final lines, like, truly haunting stuff. And I truly, like, I'm not even being hyperbolic. I closed the book and
Yeah.
stopped. I could not keep reading after this. I
Yeah.
needed to, like, take a day.
And actually,
Here's
to
the final.
Takako's point, the last line is a gut punch, like the
Yes.
best O. Henry or Hoshi Shinichi short works.
Yeah.
Not familiar,
A,
but yes, yeah,
a total gut punch. So here's the final paragraph of this story. Quote, this is the narrator speaking. Quote, and yet I know that because free will is an illusion, it's all predetermined who will descend into akinetic mutism and who won't. There's nothing anyone can do about it. You can't choose the effect the predictor has on you. Some of you will succumb, and some of you won't, and my sending this warning won't alter those proportions. So why did I do it? Because I had no choice. End quote. Oh
oh,
my God.
because also on the previous, it's like the previous paragraph. He says this is the first time we've built up the like time trick that the predictor uses for a long-term warning. So this is a warning going back 10 years. And so you read that and you go, "Oh, so there's like a chance that all of this is going to get helped. You're helping." And then that last line is like, "I'm not helping. I'm just doing
No.
what I have to
If
because I
anything,
don't
I'm
have a choice."
reconfirming your suspicions
It's so
from
good.
10 years, X number of years in the future. It's so good. Because I had no choice. It's just an absolute gut punch, like Takako said. Closes the loop on this story. Gosh, and still, it still gets the central message across. What about you? How did you feel about it? Or how do you inevitably feel about it, given you
Yeah, I
had no
didn't have
free
a
will?
choice. I also loved this story. And actually also, so I had been told by the friend who recommended, so my friend Steve recommended Ted Chiang to me initially and said he is the sort of author who, in a short story, after a short story, you should close the book and just sit with it. Sit with the story. Think about what the story
Hmm.
happened. And I will say, I think that's the best way to read Ted Chiang because it's so easy sometimes to finish a story and then just launch into the next one. But
Yeah, don't do that.
taking some time to just sit with the story is great. And this is one of those ones that doesn't give you much of a choice, ironically and appropriately.
Ironically, yeah.
You finish the story and it's like, oh shit. And I remember actually for this story in particular, I was on the train. I finished that story. I took a really deep breath. I closed the book, slowly put it back into my bag, and then didn't have music playing or anything. Just had my headphones in for 40 minutes and was like,
Right. Just the dull silence of the subway, just chugga 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 chugga.
noise cancellation on, just barely getting by.
Yeah,
It's a lot.
right.
And
The man next to you is like, "Oh my God, I think he just read What's Expected of Us by Ted Chiang."
he puts a hand on my shoulder in quiet solidarity. He's like, I didn't have a choice to put my hand on your shoulder. I'm sorry. It's, oh my God, it's so good. It's such a good, I mean, again, it's such a contained, tight little package. It reminds me again that like great stories don't have to be 1,000 pages long. And the
Yeah,
idea of just 3 or 4 pages being so effective is it's incredible. Uh,
incredible stuff.
I really liked this quote. This idea that it presents that determinism is around. You know, we've talked about determinism in the real world quite a bit, and philosophers still talk about it. And, you know, generally there's this idea of like, yeah, are we all a byproduct of just causation and there's nothing else to it? And this quote, it just wasn't harmful until you believed it, end
Oh,
quote, is excellent.
wow.
I love that. Also, because the number of beliefs that people have that would be so destructive if they fully inhabited those beliefs the way that we inhabit other beliefs. There's a lot of things that I think people come to understand and believe, but that don't really take form in like a visceral way. And an example that comes to mind is like, Abu, you and I, we know on paper how big the universe is. But when you look up at the sky, it's hard not to allow it to just be like a black dome with like dots in it, you know? It's hard not
Yeah.
to see the night sky as just a wallpaper and
Yeah.
to actually sit with the night sky, understanding that you're seeing billions of light years and light all coming to you from millions of years ago. It's like to sit with that real belief is a very different visceral feeling. So the idea of us talking about determinism and there is no such thing as free will, that and the visceral belief of it, the visceral I feel
Hmm.
what it means to not have a free will. I understand the warning of this story, and that's also why I think it's beautiful to say, hey, you know what? Just fucking wing it. Pretend like you've got free will. It's going to be the best life you have. I
Yeah.
love it. I think that's so
In fact,
great.
it'll be the only life you have because it's predetermined, and
Yeah.
so, you know,
Yeah.
wing it. Yeah,
Woo!
that is an excellent call out though. The like intellectual examination and discussion of determinism and the lack of free will versus the button in your hand that just won't fucking light up
Yeah. Yeah.
until you choose to press it, and it'll only do it when you do. That physical proof in your hand is vastly different. The gap between those two feelings is
Y-
vast.
Yeah. It's kind of highlighting that ravine that exists between what we intellectually know and what we viscerally feel and understand to be true. And
Yeah.
that's an interesting place to explore. And naturally, he did it in like 3 pages. So,
My
all of
God.
that being said, hey, folks, we appreciate you pretending like you had a choice of whether or not to listen to Kam
Yeah.
Jabbar. It's really
Yeah.
great of you.
It was inevitable.
It
You
was
push that
inevitable.
play button before, that play button, you get it. It's a
You
pretty
get
clear
it.
joke.
Yeah, yeah. A second before you started listening, you hit play. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the next short story in this one. Um, nope, let me take that again. Uh, okay, let's talk about our fourth short story in this book, The Life Cycle of Software Objects.
Yep.
So, to quickly summarize this one, this is the longest short story in the collection.
It's like
In fact,
100
it's
pages
novella
long.
sized. It's about a novella length. And the story follows the development and the nurturing of these AI entities, the Digimon, the
Digimon, yeah.
Digiants,
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
over several years. There's many, many time jumps throughout the story. As these Neopets grow more intelligent and emotionally complex, their caretakers, Anna and Derek, the two primary protagonists of the story we follow, basically face a number of moral and practical dilemmas over the years, which touch on a bunch of different ideas and topics. Primarily, a lot of ideas here about parenting and what it means to raise an intelligent being that still has much more to learn. There's also a lot of exploration of the ethics of artificial life and
Yeah.
how you treat it and what rights it has and what it doesn't have and
Is it a
what is
product? Is it an
is it a
entity? Yeah.
right? Do you sell it? Do you
Yeah.
what is the kindest way to quote unquote like put it down? To turn it off, like. And what does it want? Like how many of its wants are valid and how many of its wants are just like coded and trained into it, that sort of thing. A lot of big AI questions here as well, on top of a lot of really heartfelt parenting questions about just what it means to raise another living being. So one of the primary examples in the story, and one of the big conundrums that happens near the end, is sexuality becomes a
Right.
topic of discussion within this group. These Digians have matured to the point where the question of whether or not we can make money off of them being being used as like sort of sex objects? And if they consent to that, is that okay? Is that just employment? Is that just like consensual sex work and it gives them more
The oldest
agency?
profession, as one of them
The
says.
oldest profession,
Make
yeah.
sure.
Um, and you know, again, this also wraps up into the idea of parenting. One of the Digient owners, for example, writes on the message board, quote, I don't like the idea of anyone having sex with my Digient, but then I remembered that parents never want to think about their kids having sex either. End quote.
Yeah. At that
Yeah,
point, the
absolutely.
analogies start to become pretty clear.
Yeah, it's like very we're
Yeah.
hammering the analogy on its head for
Yeah.
sure. Um, and you know, ultimately, Derek and Anna there's like a B plot also happening throughout the story where Derek has this like crush on Anna because they bond over their Digient care so much, and
Right.
the world sort of moves on from Digients. Like it's a cool shiny product for a few years and then it goes away. The company goes under. Derek and Anna inherit many of the Digients and are their primary caretakers. They spend a lot of time together. This sex work question kind of becomes the penultimate question at the end. And the story ends when Derek goes against Anna's wishes, basically, and makes a decision for his own Digients, for his own quote unquote kids, to give them the agency to choose.
Yeah.
If
And I was
if
going to say
you
that's the key.
want to do this, go ahead.
Yeah. And I
And
was going to say
Anna
that's,
doesn't want to give them that choice.
yeah. It's so fascinating because ultimately what Derek decides is just that, oh no, Marco understands. My Digient Marco actually understands what he's volunteering for
Yes.
and
Right.
is willing to own that he doesn't know if it's going to be a mistake or not, but that he deserves to own his own mistakes. And
Yeah.
that's,
They've matured to that point over many years.
yeah, it's
And
fascinating.
Anna almost can't recognize that they've matured to that point and is worried that they can't understand what sex work would be. You know,
Right.
that they would be stepping into something without full knowledge of it, and Anna isn't quite able to trust it. But that sort of does create a rift between the two, and that's where the story ends. Basically, they have one final fateful call with each other. They have a FaceTime where they talk about this decision that Derek has made,
Yeah.
and then Derek goes his own way, and Anna goes her own way with her Digient Jax, and that's where the
Right.
story ends.
Although it does end with the future of the Digients saved. So Derek's decision, right, saves the Digients. They are going to get poured into
Yes.
the new software. They're going to be around
True.
forever.
There's like an existential problem throughout the whole story.
And it was solved, and it means that Anna doesn't have to get like brain surgery to have like a
Oh
hormonal
my god, yeah.
release
That like
thing
nicotine patch that like makes her
makes
happy or
you love
whatever.
the thing that you're helping. It's like it's
Dude.
there's so much moral ambiguity in this story.
Yes.
And again, like a lot of the earlier stories and like the later stories, it asks some very big, very impactful, very human questions without providing tidy answers in a way that I
Right.
really deeply appreciate. Because I don't
Yes.
know. I don't know what I would do in their position. I don't know if I would fall on Derek's side of it or Anna's side of it. And as they're hashing
Totally.
out the conversations, I really genuinely feel compelled by each person. Anna goes,
Yes.
here's what I think. And I go, oh, yeah, good call, Anna. And then Derek's like, but what about this? And I'm like, ah, shit, good call, Derek. Oh, fuck.
Bro, you're right, Derek,
Oh,
bro.
bro. Oh, no. So, yeah, great. It was a great time.
That's a good call out. I also left this story with a deeply uncomfortable feeling of I don't know if what just happened is right. You know,
Yeah.
is this what should have happened? Is this what I would have done? I don't know. I
Also,
left like uncomfortable, which I think was
like,
the intention.
am I making the mistake that Anna's making, thinking of them as animals and or humans? And they are not. They're neither.
They're
And at
neither.
one point,
Yes.
Derek's going, am I making the mistake of relegating this being in front of me, Marco, to thinking of him like a chimp or like a dog? Or am I thinking about him like a human who can eventually
Right.
become like a human? And
Yeah.
Anna seems caught between the two. Anna seems to think of the Digients between being an animal or being eventually human, human adjacent. And yet, what does that mean if you're ascribing them to the moral refinements of those two life forms when they're neither? And Derek
Yeah.
seems to kind of fall into this like, well, maybe we don't know. Maybe we don't have good answers, and maybe we just let them make mistakes and recognize that that's part of life. and that's part of,
Right.
you
Some
know,
eggs are going to get broken along the way of
yeah,
us like figuring this out. And it's messy, right? Like both of those answers are icky. Like you're not
yeah,
satisfied with either of them, kind of by the end. And yeah, it's a good story. Here's what I'll say. This is my least favorite story in the book.
all of that being said, fuck the story.
but again, like head and shoulders above so much
Yeah,
other
yeah,
writing out there. Like that's the thing. Like Ted, we'll talk about it at the end, but in my mind, Ted Chiang can like do no wrong. This is my least favorite story in the book, mostly because I do think it goes on a bit too long.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
we've like made the point halfway through the story, and then it just keeps going and keeps hammering the point home. But here's what I'll say: when I first read this short story many many years ago, I was much younger. That's how linear time works. And I had like far less responsibility, and I was just frankly I was just like a young. I wasn't a kid, but I was like a young fucking kid. Um, and so many of the like poignant ideas in this story around parenting in particular and like raising children, like whew, right above my head, like utterly lost on me.
Yeah.
I had no empathy for any of the like parenting questions that Anna and Derek struggled with in this story the first time I read it. On this most recent reread, now that I'm in my 30s, I'm older. I don't have kids to be clear, but I have experience raising multiple pets, and I'm not trying to make some analogy that like children are just pets, but the basic mechanics and feelings of like taking care of and raising like a intelligent being and keeping it happy and fed and healthy, those are generally the same, right? And so I felt much more empathetic to the parenting questions in the story this time
Mm,
around.
yeah.
And in fact, they hit me quite harder this time too. There were moments where I was like, "Whoa, I need to take a beat here," because that's heartbreaking. I want to share one of these moments. One of these moments that really hit me like a truck is early on in the story. The Digiants at one point sort of naturally and accidentally discover King of the Hill.
Yeah. Or like rolling
And
down the hill, right? Like the
or rolling
joy
down the hill,
of
the
just,
joy of yeah.
yeah,
And it's totally spontaneous. This
yeah,
isn't a thing they were training for or practicing. They're just hanging out, and suddenly the Digians start to do this, and they're having so much fun, and they start to copy each other, and they're playing on this hill, and it's a clear like natural moment where the AI has developed something new on its own. Jax is participating, having so much fun. But then, because of business decisions, Anna is forced to roll all the Digians back to like a previous save.
yeah. Like someone
And
says
so,
fuck. Like one of the
yeah, I
digits is
think one of
like,
the kids like cusses.
fuck. And it's like, oh shit, we got to roll them back
Oh
a week
no,
or
we got to
whatever. Yeah.
reset them to like back to the
Yeah.
previous checkpoint. God damn it, we got to make sure they never cuss. We can't sell a cussing toy to like kids.
Right, right, right.
So she flips the switch, resets them. They go back to a different checkpoint, and that like, gosh, that like really got me, because having like raising a dog, one of the greatest joys of raising a dog, a pet of any kind, is watching them as their parent discover something new or to
Hmm.
learn something new and to start doing it on their own. Not something that like you've trained them or that you're working on and practicing and that you want them to do, something they have naturally discovered on their own. And that brings them great joy, and watching them do that and embrace that. That is truly like one of the greatest joys of
Hmm.
being a parent to a pet. And I imagine it's similar for children as well, probably on a much more intense level, honestly.
For sure.
And like part of that is realizing that like they are building their own confidence in themselves. They explored something new on their own, but their worldview is now expanding as well. No thanks to me.
Hmm.
This intelligent being has expanded its own worldview because of its own confidence. And ultimately, like as a parent, that's what you want for your kids, for your pets. Like you want them to be self-sustaining individuals who are capable of doing that, and don't rely on you for everything. And For Anna to just flip a switch, go to a previous checkpoint, and rip that away. That hill that you had so much fun playing on, this new thing you discovered, this
Yeah,
expansion of
yeah,
your world,
yeah,
gone.
yeah.
Like, ugh, that really got me. I was like, oh my God, that's so tragic for the Digiants, for the kids. That's so tragic for the parents. And God, it's just like such an awful thing to happen in this story. Um, that was just one moment. I think there were a number of moments throughout the story, in particular when it came to parenting questions, that definitely hit me harder this time around because I just have more experience in that regard. Not even with kids, you know. I think even on a smaller scale with pets, you still have many of the same feelings and many of the same, you know, practical and ethical conundrums. Is my dog happy? Does he actually like going to the park and walking around? And to like solve those solutions and then watch them find joy in that is just one of the most rewarding things ever.
Hmm.
So I will say, not my favorite story. I still think it's the weakest of the bunch in my opinion,
Hmm.
but I had a fresh perspective on it this time around, which I really appreciated. It still overstays its welcome a little bit. It drags well beyond the point where the ideas have landed and the point has been made, but I enjoyed it much more this time around. Um, I will say I could have lost the whole Derek loves Anna B plot though. I felt like that was like kind of pointless, and then ultimately
Hmm.
it really went nowhere. It would have been fine if they were just close friends. I don't know that we needed a sort of romantic entanglement there as well. But
Hmm.
those are sort of my feelings. What about you? Where does this story fall for you, and do you feel similarly?
Yeah, it's funny because I agree. This is, I think, my least favorite part of the book of reading this short story collection. But I think I've here's a possibility. I think this it's hard not to be dragged down by the pacing shift because we just finished What's Expected of Us, which is like 3 pages
Yeah.
long. And then a
Yep.
little later we have stories like The Great Silence, which is like lightning speed. It's like 5 pages long, 6 pages long. You know, there are even the last story, which is longer, still has a lot going on and a lot changing and a lot of perspective shifts and all that. So I think that the challenge with this story is that it is a novella and it is nested between short stories. And that's a
Mm.
challenge. That's just a challenge of
Mm-hmm.
form. If I said, "Hey, we're going to go to a short film festival," and then I show you a 2-hour film in the middle of a short film festival, it's going to feel like unreasonably long. And I think by itself, if you presented this to me, like I read pretty recently Jekyll and Hyde, just as like a little self-contained book, I think I would love this story. Like
Yeah,
so
that's a great call out.
I think I would really just love this story, no caveats. I'd be like, what a phenomenal story. Because also thinking about it, the way that we are introduced to the Digiants and we are slowly given these more and more complex moral questions of, is it right to take away the first time they roll down a hill, all the way to, is it right to have sex with them? And it is a process of slowly but surely building up this big moral conundrum in a way
Yeah.
that is so compelling and so beautiful. And I also, although I do think that maybe we didn't need the Derek and Anna side plot, I think there's something interesting. I really love the moments where Derek is wondering if he's supporting her because he wants to be in her good favor or if he's supporting her because he thinks it's
Yeah.
right to support her. And this also gets to the question
Or
of how to
whether supporting her will make her boyfriend break up with her so she becomes
so that
single
she's
so he
so
can jump in there,
yeah.
and the icky feelings he feels about that. That's true. The romance does add some layers of complexity to their interactions,
And I
for
think
sure.
it
Good call out.
allows the moral questions to expand beyond parents treating children how. This becomes just morality. What does it mean to be a good friend and to be supportive of someone
Yeah.
when you are aware of how things can
Great
turn
point.
out?
Yeah.
And I think I don't know that that is necessarily going to be, if what you're getting out of this story is the resonance of like being a pet parent, then for sure that might be a little bit off the beaten path, but I do think that there's a place in the story for that. And I appreciate also that Derek and Anna effectively represent two very well intentioned but different perspectives on the same conundrum, which is how do you give agency to something before you're whether or not you're sure of whether it's ready for it. And they fall on different sides of the decision, and that ultimately is a barb in their relationship. But it's really poignant. I'll also I'll share a quote that I found really poignant. This is from Anna's perspective. She's talking
Yeah,
about a lesson that she
this is
learned
so good.
about how to raise the Digians, and kind of because a lot of these companies throughout the story are trying to figure out the like lightning in a bottle way to get to sophisticated artificial intelligence, but with common sense and with a sense of like intuition. And she says this quote, experience isn't merely the best teacher, it's the only teacher. If she's learned anything from raising Jacks, it's that there are no shortcuts. If you want to create the common sense that comes from 20 years of being in the world, you need to devote 20 years to the task. You can't assemble an equivalent collection of heuristics in less time. Experience is algorithmically incompressible. End
Oh,
quote.
fucking
Fucking
banger.
bars. God damn it. Like, what a great explanation. And ultimately, like, that resonates with me so much in a creative field. You can't get to 10,000 hours of drawing experience without putting in 10,000 hours. Like, that's just
Yeah,
the way it
amen.
works. And when you talk about technology compressing things and allowing you to, yeah, printing books is much faster now that we have mechanical prints. That's great. ChatGPT speeds up a lot of things, but it is wrong to say I can speed up everything. There are certain things that take time, and that is always going to be the case. And in this case, it's like, yeah, building up 20 years worth of heuristics, that takes 20 years, and there's no way to compress
Yeah,
that.
so good.
It's really excellent. Again, that there are moments within this story that really stuck with me, but you're right. It's like it's 109 pages long, but who's counting? I counted. That was me. I counted. And ultimately that's rough when you go from a 4-page story to a 109-page story. It's like, oh man, I could have read What's Expected of Us 26 times, and instead I'm like on page 74 of learning about this Pokemon that they want to have sex with. Like, all right, whatever. So anyway, I'll wrap up my thoughts by saying, in particular, I really enjoyed. It's the last page. It's like the second to last page. Anna is kind of daydreaming about what the future of Digiance looks like. Now that
Yeah, this is
Derek's made this
beautiful.
choice, he's secured the future of Digiance. What does Jax's future look like? And she wonders about, like, yeah, there's going to be this whole generation of people. The next generation of people will grow up. Jax's dancing friends treat Jax as just another buddy. And there's going to be generations that treat Jax as normal. And that also means could see Jax as a romantic partner, could see Jax as like a someone to share a life with. And that's something different generationally. And what does that mean, right? Where do we find common ground between humans and human-made sentience? Really fascinating questions, and no, again, no tidy answers, but interesting
Yeah.
questions. And it really also gave me a sense of like, yeah, this is the Butlerian jihad to come. Because let's say 8,000 years down the road, you have a Digiant in charge of a hospital and decides to abort a child. Now you have the Butlerian jihad. And then eventually you have a Digiant named Erasmus who takes joy in torturing people, and there's the Digiant
Mm-hmm.
Omnius, and then there's and then all the computers get banned, and then you have Leto to Atreides. So all I'm saying is this is a prequel to Dune, and
That's right.
it's all continuous. Anna is Bene Gesserit.
Yeah, a great story, and clearly we had a lot of thoughts and feelings on it, and there's so many great ideas to explore and talk about. Um, and so wild to still think like I thought this was the weakest of the bunch, but it's still iconic.
Yeah,
Some might say.
that's worth saying. Is and we'll say this at the end too, but like the worst Ted Chiang story is still heads and shoulders above most authors and what they're capable
Yeah,
of. So it's like
truly.
It's crazy. I do want to call out a couple of the comments we've gotten recently. So
Yes,
Normal
we're getting
Senva
some great
first shared
comments.
that the audiobook performance was so good for this. Jax, the verbal skills for Jax clearly improve on pace with their maturity, which is so
Yeah,
sick. I didn't know that. That's awesome to hear. What a great way of demonstrating their maturity as they get older. Takako sharing, having raised a kid to 17, could see parallels with the evolution of her own parenting, having to evolve along with the child's development, including figuring out where to draw the line between protecting them and letting them experience life choices in meaningful ways. Absolutely. Like I think about the number of times I, as in my raising, being raised by parents, came close to death. And it's like, do you ever want that
Jesus.
for your kids? It's like, no. But I, again, my what I think is a tenable risk is based on life experience. And that's also part of what keeps me alive moving forward. So it's
True.
hard. And there's no clean answer. There's no silver bullet that solves all of this. Also, Normal Senva. These sound like similar conundrums previous generations had with the special needs children. Protecting them and advocating for them and respecting their right to humanness can be tricky to pull off. 1,000%. Yeah. In particular, I think the idea of many of these things, it's like we are now diagnosing and being able to identify a lot more complexity to human personalities and human capabilities. But does that change the baseline level of dignity and respect and the opportunity for people to make mistakes? Where do you draw that line? I don't think there's an easy answer to that. But all of these things come up, and I think that's where Ted is brilliant in what he's writing.
Yeah,
So
completely. And we're not done with parenting yet, folks, because it's gonna these ideas are gonna come up again in the next short
cool.
story.
True.
But before we get into that, let's take a quick breather. We're halfway through the book. We've covered the first 4 stories, and we have just a few more left to go to wrap up Exhalation by Ted Chiang. So stick around. We will be right back in just a minute to continue with our discussion. Bing. These ideas are actually going to come up in the next short story. These ideas about parenting are actually going to come up in the next short story in this collection.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your break. Hope you're ready for some more parenting. Because next up, we've got story number 5, Dacey's Patent Automatic Nanny. And this story is fascinating. I mean, this story might as well be straight out of Darius Balat or like the archivists, the God Emperor of Dune, epigraphs. This is presented as an excerpt from a fictional historical article, and this story recounts the life of Reginald Dacey, a Victorian-era inventor who basically sought to create an automated, mechanical, perfect parent, and to basically like raise children, right? A nanny to raise children according to rational, scientific principles. None of this
That's right.
hysterical ladies, these fucking Irish
No.
people. Ugh.
Oh my gosh.
Ugh. Instead, we're going to have a robot do it. It's going to be great. Now, as prototype, a robot caregiver gains some attention and, the bunch sell. It's great. They in their advertisements, they leverage people's hatred of minorities, basically. But the product's reputation is damaged irreparably when one of them throws a baby.
Yikes.
Chucks a baby. And of course, it is discovered that that unit was tampered with, but nevertheless, the reputational damage
Too little, too
was
late.
done.
Yeah.
Too little, too late. Now, the story follows his son, Lionel Dacey, who was raised almost exclusively by the machine, and who picks up his father's calling, his father's mission, adopting an infant, and then putting it in the care of a robo-nanny, basically saying, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to prove that a well taken care of child, I'm going to do it. It's going to work out great.
Yeah, it works. Our product works.
Yeah, look, I believe in it. Now, before long, the kid Edmund appears unresponsive to humans. And Lionel goes, oh, damn, I guess this kid genetically was not good. So basically checks the child into a home for kids with developmental challenges, basically, assuming he's simple or something like that. Now, enter into the story Dr. Thackeray Lambshead.
Oh, what a good name.
What a great name. Who is an expert in childhood development. he discovers Edmund Dacey can only grow, can only develop, actually physically, can only continue to develop and grow and mature with robo parents, with the robotic nanny as a
Mm,
continued source. This is no longer a temporary band aid. This is the whole shebang for Edmund. Oops.
yeah.
Sorry, Lionel, you fucked up. And when Lionel discovers that his son is very responsive to robots and basically acts completely normally apace his expected development with
Yeah.
robo parents, he realizes how much his experiment fucked up this kid's life and attempts to commit himself to being a better father, right? He says, I'm going to take the kid home. I'll set up the robo parenting strategy at home, and I'm going to be a good father for this poor child. The child, Edmund, dies of pneumonia, and shortly thereafter, Lionel Dacey also passes away. And checking a summary of this story, ChatGPT says that this cautionary tale critiques over reliance on technology and the hubris of trying to engineer human nature. And then
Oh,
sent me a number of emojis that seemed threatening. I don't know if ChatGPT was recognizing the irony, but nevertheless, fascinating. Really interesting story. Love the framing.
yeah.
What did you think
Really
of this
interesting.
story overall?
I liked this one a lot. I can't say this is a top contender for me, but I still enjoyed it immensely. Great framing, great story, really interesting concept, and again, a very clear, impactful message at the heart of the story. I think, like zooming out, there's just something so relevant about Dacey's assumption that the impossibly difficult and delicate task that is parenting, that is raising a child,
Yeah,
can be just solved with math and science.
yeah,
You know, technology will handle this. And in fact,
yeah.
technology will do it better and more efficient.
Oh my God.
Is like, come
I
on.
see
Is
where you're
that not
going. Go
everything
off,
we're
King.
hearing?
Go off, King.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, is that not everything? I just watched that cringy ass video that OpenAI did with Johnny Ive. Um, and it was so stupid. Like the sales pitch of modern generative. That's the word I'm looking for. Uh, the sales pitch of modern generative AI is like, oh, you know that art that takes artists 10,000 plus hours of
Yeah. Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
work, blood, sweat, and tears and sacrifice? What if math could just do that better and faster and more efficiently? Wouldn't that solve all of our problems? And that's what Daisy is doing. Daisy is looking at a thing that takes, to Anna's point from the previous story, 20 years of development and saying, boom, this nanny can just do it
Done.
for me. I don't
Yeah.
have to work
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
all. I get 20 years of my life back. This kid gets raised. It's perfect.
Bada bing, bada
My hands are
boom.
clean.
Yeah.
It's just so relevant to today. You know, like this is the exact conversation we're having today around artificial intelligence and in general, our human relationship with our technology, how much we all use our phones, screen time, all of these modern conversations we're having about how much technology is too much technology and where that line is, and what technology can actually solve, and the things that it probably can never solve. Parenting being one of them, raising an intelligent, living, full human being being one of the things that Daisy assumed technology could do, and it clearly can't. This is a bit of a side tangent, but this makes me think of a recent New York Mag article that I was reading, which was highlighting the basically this apocalypse level danger that AI presents to academia right now,
Mm,
and to students' ability to learn, and more importantly, their ability to learn how to learn
sure.
is
Yeah.
is disappearing at like an apocalyptic rate. Um, in the article, for example, it said that like something wild like 90% of students surveyed have used AI in some capacity to do their homework for them. And in fact, the article highlights a couple of students in particular, kind of interviews them and talks about their stories, who straight up just have been submitting ChatGPT assignments like wholesale. They just like put the assignment into ChatGPT, whatever comes out, they just email to their professor. And even professors are like, at first it was obvious
Right.
what
But
was
now
written
it's
by
not.
AI
Yeah.
because AI
Yeah.
is was dumb, but like
Right.
AI is improving so quickly that now it's becoming harder to even find the copy pasted stuff versus the stuff that a student naturally wrote, just because it's going so quickly. And you know, like one of the kids in the article, like literally got into fucking Columbia doing that, and is like submitting his assignments at Columbia University just through ChatGPT,
Yeah.
and doesn't care. Is like openly honest about that, and it's like, yeah, I don't have to ever do my homework. ChatGPT does it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just like scary, right? Like that is a wild thought to have, that like we are outsourcing the ability to learn to a piece of technology, just like Daisy is trying to outsource the ability to raise a child to a robot. And
Yeah.
I think much like Lionel, we will have some hard lessons to learn about this and to confront. What
Yeah.
about you though? Where did this story land for you? What did it make you think of?
Well, I wanted to say quickly, I had a conversation about this with a teacher friend of mine recently because he was saying that like he's seen this happen a lot with his students as well. And I want to highlight that like the tools have changed the playing field. And something that the educational systems have always failed to do is to keep abreast the modern equipment for children. And if you are basing your full educational plan on people's ability to write papers on stuff, you are failing the modern era of people. Because ultimately, like, how important is it to like I try to delineate within myself like what am I used to, what am I familiar with, and what's objectively, as much as there's no such thing as objectivity, what is like good and what is defensible. And I think the challenge is I am afraid of the future and what is happening, especially if people are getting into fucking Columbia. But I'm like, isn't it also a condemnation of Columbia's application process that someone can just fucking send words and get in? It's like, then I think that there is a two-pronged responsibility here for the tools to be litigated in such a way that they're not being used incorrectly, but also educators to help the children understand why it is damaging to use these tools in these ways.
Yeah,
Because in the
definitely.
same way that like, yeah, spell check. I don't know how to fucking spell. I misspell shit all the time. And it's not apocalyptic that I don't know how to spell. You know, I can spell pretty well, but again, it's like when it comes to, certain words, it's hard.
Yeah,
It's hard to do that.
eponymous.
It's if that, for instance, uh, as an example. But the same thing with like, the number of times people told us we had to write cursive because of how important cursive is in life and how
Yeah,
fucking
I've never used
little I've
cursive in
never
my
used
life.
cursive once in my goddamn life. What a waste of time. So for people to say this is a waste of time to write these essays, maybe they're fucking right. What if that's true? And I don't think it's true, but I don't know. I don't have the answers any more than anybody else has the answers. And when people are too certain about these things, it starts to feel very like, parents going, stop Googling things. And it's like, shut up. Like there is a way to use technology. And I've used ChatGPT to benefit my own learning process in different ways. But I have this groundwork of understanding how a tool should be used. Is there a right way to use it? I don't know. But I think it's also very quick to point our fingers at Gen Alpha and go, look at them handing over the responsibility of learning to ChatGPT. But I also think it's the teachers failing to being given the space to really address these new tools and how these tools are best used to prepare people for a future that none of us know what it's going to look like. Are we even going to have, breathable air in 50 years? Who's to fucking
Yeah,
say?
true. I mean,
And then are we?
right.
And then we're here going, oh, they don't know how to do math. It's like, well, yeah, the fucking world's on fire. Come on,
Yeah.
we don't know.
Oh my God. Write in cursive, please. It'll
Right?
stop the ice caps from
Yeah,
melting.
it'll save the polar bears. You selfish bitch. Like, it's like, oh, anyway, I just wanted to put
Yeah.
that out there.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think the responsibility falls on the governments and the proper guardrails to be implemented, and also on the educational systems and institutions themselves to address
Yeah,
the technology. But I think what's different is like spell check didn't let you turn your brain off in every instance of every assignment of every homework, um, and effectively do it for you. I just think AI is a different scale of tool
It's on the
that
same
affects
spectrum, but you're right, it's a different
education.
scale. Yeah.
That affects education in a different way. And I think that like my concern is that it takes away the initiative to learn how to learn. Like you can go to ChatGPT and type in something because you're curious about something or you're learning, and you use it as a step in your learning process. But to use it as the only thing that solves a problem for you and to accept it blind, whatever it turns out blindly. Like full transparency, I used it to refresh my memory and summarize this book for me. It utterly fucked up the summary for the last book or for the last story.
Oh yeah.
It
Wow.
mixed up every single name,
Wow, that's so funny.
and I was
To be
like,
fair,
"Why does
I
this not
also mixed
sound
up all
right?"
the names. I'm like Dana. Oh, there's Nat, and there's Dana, and there's. That's so funny.
Yeah. So, and
Yeah,
again, like that will be corrected. AI will correct, like, advancing so quickly that that's one example of a moot point, um, where like AI will eventually be able to summarize this book perfectly and not fuck up the names like it did when I typed it in. Um, but I think it's just a different. You're right. I think this is a problem we have to solve where it's like AI is not going away, and we have to teach people how to use it as a learning tool and as part of their learning process, rather than like Daisy treat it as an offloading of the process.
yeah,
Integrate it into the process. Like these robo nannies could help you raise the child.
yeah. Sure,
Take care of the child when you got an important meeting or something, rock it to sleep or whatever. Cool, it's
sure,
part of your process. But to fully say technology, take this whole thing away from me and do it
right,
for
right,
me
right, right.
because I don't want to do it anymore. That I think is different,
Well, it's
and
giving.
that's where my fear lies in the education system.
It's saying to a hammer like you're going to do the whole build. You're going to build the whole building because you've demonstrated you're very good at hitting nails. And it's like, no, the hammer is very good at hitting nails. That's what it does. And similarly, LLMs are very good at very specific things. They are not very good at everything. And when we say we're going to use them for everything, we are failing to utilize a tool well. I think where
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
afraid is that a lot of, especially older folk, and I say older, including everyone like late 20s and older, it's like we lived pre GPT tools. And so we know what it was like to struggle with homework. But how many of the fucking papers did I write really stuck with me? And how much of it was more how I engaged in conversation about things and the meaningful conversations I had and the people. It's like there. I think that if you are saying there's this new improved hammer that's really good at nailing nails, and I'm bummed because all the students are using it to nail all the nails, and you're like, are you only giving them nails to nail? Aren't you giving them harder problems and new ways? Like they have this great new tool. Let's learn how to utilize the tool for great new problems. And let's actually level up what people are able to do because we've offloaded the simple fact checking and this, or we've offloaded some of the process. So now let's
Yeah,
look at what that frees up
yeah. For
capability
example, fact
wise.
checking is a thing I would never trust ChatGPT to do.
Right. That's true too.
Because it like utterly got the facts wrong of this
Hallucinates
book.
shit. It
It
doesn't know
hallucinates.
anything.
AI
Yeah.
like it does. AI doesn't know anything. It
Right.
regurgitates information, so it can also regurgitate wrong information. That's neither here
Right.
nor
Right.
there.
Right.
But like,
Yeah.
you're absolutely correct. Like it is a tool meant for a slice of the process, meant to tackle a certain segment of
Right.
things. It is not a blanket. It's being sold as a blanket, as a robo nanny that will just do the whole process for you. It really. My last thought on this, I will say, the whole AI conversation that's currently happening in the world right now. I always come back to this one like silly tweet I saw a while back. I'm paraphrasing, but the tweet basically said like, "Why the fuck is AI constantly being sold as the thing that will create art and take away like artist's work rather than doing my fucking laundry, the actual thing I don't want to do?" Like
Yeah.
how come this tool is being used to actually take the joy part of life
Yeah.
off, like offload the joyous part of life where I create art and explore things and write and read and
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
all of the creative stuff, and take the mundane shit away from me. Do my
Yeah.
dishes and do my fucking laundry so that I have more time to practice my 10,000 hours of creating art myself and
Yeah.
expressing my humanity, rather than the robotic function
Right.
of scrubbing my goddamn dishes so I can eat dinner.
Yeah.
That is funny
That's
to
so
me.
funny.
Like
Yeah, that's true.
that cuts through the bullshit for me of like, yeah, man, I don't want to be sold AI that makes art for me. I want to be sold AI that does work for me that I don't want
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah. Again, it's the spectrum
And
of like,
that's the distinction of what it's used for. I think that's the
yeah,
point you're honing in on. What we choose to use for it and the scope of the tool.
right. Like printing presses freed up a lot of human hours to do other stuff. And it's like, yeah, it took away certain creative fields, but those fields exist in niches. You know, there are still hand sign painters, even though vinyl printing is so much faster and more effective. And it's like it exists, it will always exist, but is it is it widely needed enough that it can become a career? That's going to shift and
Yeah,
change as technology
yeah,
evolves.
yeah.
But yeah,
Big
the fact
questions.
that like, you know, there've been actual examples of AI being used for art in like commercial settings, it's insane.
Yeah,
Yeah. Anyway, back to Ted Chiang. Broadly, so this Robo Nanny story, I also wanted to say, so that's you've talked a lot about this kind of like, yeah, the handing humanity over to automation. That's super resonant for sure. The other side of this that I thought was really interesting is how a lot of the broad assumptions we've made about childhood development over the years and about like what is normal, what is a normal mind, what is what does it mean to be normal on a developmental basically Edmund, right? This child was not developmentally challenged. It was early
right.
life things that basically led to an unrecognized, undiagnosed thing that
Yes.
once that was accounted for, he could live and grow normally. And like that was great. Now it might have been too little too late and he ended up passing away. But like I can't help but think about the conversations today about like autism
Yeah.
spectrum disorder, where it's like we look back on hundreds of years of human history and probably some of the greatest contributors to human knowledge were autistic. And like there's nothing wrong with that. It's just how they are. It's how the brain is wired. It's not, as our fucking RFK Jr. would say, it's not
Oh
a
my God.
what does he call it? Uh he's used some fucking insane words for it. I won't give his words platform. He's dumb. He's dumb and wrong. The point is, it's like this is just how people are, and then better understanding that and working with it is the goal, not being like, well, they're fucked, put them in a building somewhere. I really appreciated this story from that perspective as well, that like
Yeah.
childcare is multifaceted and humans are multifaceted, and the sooner we recognize that it's not something you're just going to put into ChatGPT, or you're not going to give to the robotic nanny that moves its arms at a perfect RPM for baby soothing. It's like the sooner we can remember that the human parts of life are important. Uh,
Yeah. That's a
Again,
great call out. It's like
Lato
that
too, I
one
think.
quote where it's like,
Yeah.
if you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, you're
Yeah,
gonna think it's a dumb
fucking
fish.
sucks. What a bad tree climbing fish.
What a bad
Terrible.
fish. You can't
What
climb
a
this
terrible
tree?
fish.
Fuck you, fish.
It's a
You
tree
know?
climbing quiz. All the other fish
Yeah,
failed it too, but you know the monkeys
right.
passed. Why
This
aren't
is a
you
standardized tree climbing test. Pass the goddamn
standardized?
test so you can get into standardized tree climbing college, you dumbass fish.
There's a lot of trees to
Uh,
climb. And the fish is like, what about
yeah,
rivers to swim in? And you're like, that too. Anyway, climb
yeah,
this tree, idiot.
right. Which I think is always has been and always will be a valid criticism of the education system. Is like there's only so much you can railroad
Yeah,
um, teaching until you run into an Edmund who just will never succeed in the railroaded standardized system
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
needs the robo nanny, but then will suddenly achieve the same level as the quote unquote regular kids in the railroad system
Right.
who
Yeah.
are on the train. Edmund just requires a different set of tools and a different environment to equally thrive in, just like the fish needs to be in water and not on a goddamn tree.
So strange. So weird. Who could have seen that coming? You know? Yeah.
So that's
I
a really
just,
great point. Good call out.
yeah, it's something that kind of came to mind. And then finally, I'll just say that, like, yeah, broadly, I think the lesson of this story is clear that, like, I like that Reginald Dacey is our introduction to this idea, and he's the one that invented the nanny. But through his failure, and then also Lionel's failure to
Yeah.
kind of take up his father's claims, like, we are seeing that this broad assumption that you can automate, mechanize, take responsibility and the humanity out of child rearing, and just like that feels like a warning that Leto 2 would very much approve of. This idea
Oh,
of
yeah.
like of being human with one another. We shouldn't be overly reliant on technology. We can use technology. Again, he breaks the great convention all the time, but when it comes to human to human interaction, nothing should take the place of love. Nothing can take the place of love. I liked the story a lot. It was cool.
Yeah, I liked it too. And obviously it sent me down like an AI rabbit hole as well.
Yeah, true.
Okay, God, this next one's a banger. We're going so long. We need to like move a little faster
I know.
here.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, story number 6, truth of fact, truth of feeling.
Is that what it's called?
My God. Yeah, is this what it's called? I don't know. I've called it like 20 different, even in my text to you over the past
Yeah,
couple of
yeah,
weeks, I've called it like 10 different names. But I've talked about this story a lot, specifically with
yeah,
like
yeah.
people I've been telling about this book and with you, Leo. Okay, very quick. I'm going to lightning through this summary. So this story is like a 2-for-1. We're seeing 2 parallel stories happen. In story A, we are following the perspective of the journalist Jeffrey in the not so distant future. And Jeffrey is writing an article or doing research for an article about this new product by the company Whetstone, Remem. And we learned that in this future, everyone basically has every moment of their lives recorded on video through
Yeah.
whatever, through their glasses, through body cams, whatever. And what Remem does is that it's automatically able to recall any moment from your recordings, from your life recordings, and is able to do that almost automatically. You might be in a conversation and talking about that one time you saw Dune Part 2, and suddenly in the corner, a screen will pop up with the exact recording
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
theater you visited to see Dune Part 2. It's like Siri on fucking so much cocaine. And what's kind of crazy is that Whetstone's like sales pitch for Remem is this should take the place of your organic memory. Brains are inefficient. Brains can't recall things perfectly, as we all know. You forget things all the time. Remem will just do it for you. Offload that task, baby. Let Remem handle every time you need to recall a specific memory from your past. And you'll get the 100% truth every time because it's recorded.
Yeah.
So the journalist is sort of reflecting on this and reflecting on his own life as a father and sort of the troubled relationship he's had with his daughter. His wife left, that caused a rift between them. And this all sort of builds up to the moment where the father realizes. So, Jeffrey tests Remem, goes back to a specific fight he remembers having with his daughter, and he realizes, oh shit, it was me. I was the problem in that fight. It wasn't my daughter being a brat. I'm actually I'm a shittier father than I ever thought. And I've been lying to myself this whole time.
Not only did I say the shitty thing, I remembered her saying the shitty thing. So what does that say about me that I gave her the burden of the thing that I brought to the conversation? It's
right.
Oof.
Yeah. I didn't even like justify what I said or something. I literally offloaded my guilt onto her, and that's how I remember that incident. Just showing us the fallibility of memory and how emotions play into that and everything. We've all experienced this, of course. The journalist then kind of goes to his daughter, is really repentant and apologizes. The daughter, quite harsh but honest, which I respected, and was like, yeah, Dad, this is why we've always had a bad relationship. You're a shitty dad.
Yeah.
And I've needed to distance myself from you and go through much therapy to get to a place where we could even talk.
Yeah.
And the journalist promises, like, hey, now that I've used Remem to realize this about myself, I'm going to continue analyzing myself, analyzing my relationship with you in the past, the truth of it, not what I remember of it. and I promise to be a better father moving forward. And the daughter's like, okay, we'll see. Clearly still skeptical, but
Yeah. And also
this technology,
don't come to me every time you want to feel better about yourself.
yeah,
Like
don't
don't
offload your guilt by coming
yeah,
here
yeah, yeah.
crying every day. Yeah,
Oh,
totally. Which I
huge.
loved. Like amazing boundary setting from the daughter. Honestly,
Yeah.
goals.
She clearly
I need
goes
to
to
do this with my
therapy.
own parents. You like,
Clearly has gone to therapy and it worked.
it worked. That's our A plot. Intercut between all of this is the B plot, and this is the story of Djingi, a Tiv native whose tribe has recently been visited by a European priest, a missionary, Mosby. And Mosby teaches Djingi how to read and write,
Hmm.
which is an alien concept for the Tiv people, who, in fact, remember their history and share their stories orally.
Right.
And Djingi, this truly begins to reshape Djingi's worldview. He finds himself sort of bumping up against the conflict between what is accurate, what has been written down perhaps,
Right.
and what is true, or what feels true. And eventually, Djingi realizes that over the course of many years, as he has learned to read and write, he has also taken on the European way of thinking. He's beginning to distance himself from the Tiv way of thinking and prioritizing feelings and oral tradition. And he is beginning to revere the truth over what is right. And I really loved, for example, the judicial proceedings that happened in the Tiv court and
Mm.
how the European Mosby was confused and Tujingi had to explain, like, in our traditions, we think both defendants are right because for them that is what they feel is right. Nothing is written down, and this court here is going to establish what the agreed upon truth is, whether or not it is actually true because it's never been written down. We are going to come to an agreement and say this is the truth moving forward. That's how we operate. That's a wildly different way of holding judicial proceedings than you know we we do in modern times with the written word. So the story then ends. The story kind of loops up and ends, and we realize, oh, okay, Jeffrey has actually been in his article writing and telling the story of Tujingi, which he's
Right. Right.
studied, rather than writing a report on Remem. He tells his story and Tujingi's story intentionally in his article, to illustrate this point, to basically talk about how writing changed Tujingi's worldview and that Remem has the ability to do the same for better and for worse. It will change human lives and human interactions forever. And whether or not that's good or bad, only time and or next season's Black Mirror will tell. And that's where this story wraps up.
Yeah.
What did you
Uh
think of this one?
yeah. Oh man. I loved this story on a reread. In fact, it's really seeing the way as we are introduced to Jeffrey's tale, seeing the way that he presents his truth in the story that he's writing for us before Remem shows us and also him what really happened with his daughter, and in particular,
Mm-hmm.
uh oh wait, what happened with him and his daughter. I think that's excellent. I think it was really fun to kind of be on that ride with him, and rereading in particular was really fun. I liked this quote a lot. Quote, people are made of stories. Our memories are not the impartial accumulation of every second we've lived. They are the narrative that we assembled out of selected moments. End quote. Like,
Beautiful.
what an incredible little moment. And I definitely felt very in touch with, yeah, just the way that narrative is built up, the way we build up identities and who are we and who is Leo, right? I find myself, especially in my 30s, like I've been really bumping up against that. Like, is there an immutable Leo? Is there a me that exists at the heart of every anecdote about me or that involves me? And my whole journey, is it just the people I've surrounded myself with? Is it reinforcement that I am a certain way a little bit, so I find myself attracted to people who are like that, and then they reinforce that? It's like, I don't know. And I think that's been the sort of like hardest thing to come to terms with, is this idea of like, I'm not sure where one's identity begins and ends with the stories we tell us about ourselves. and the
Yeah.
way that we sort of
Yeah.
self-identify. So again, just seeing that was really cool. I also just the last chunk of the story where it becomes clear that Jeffrey's writing all of this as an exploration of the theme.
Yeah. Oh my
I think
God.
man,
Ted.
Ted was on a fucking banger weekend when he wrote this. Uh, quote, "We don't normally think of it as such, but writing is a technology, which means that a literate person is someone whose thought processes are technologically mediated. We became cognitive cyborgs as soon as we became fluent readers, and the consequences of that were profound." End quote.
Cognitive
Heat!
cyborgs.
Heat! I mean,
Oh
god
my
damn.
God.
I mean, I think about that with music, and I had a long conversation recently with friends about in the barbershop music tradition. You know, hello, my baby, hello. You teach music orally. You don't really do the sheet music that much historically because it was a sort of like layperson's music where you would just like teach your buddies how to sing, and you experience the music very differently that way when you're not tied to what the sheet music on a piece of paper looks like, right? Like
Yeah.
you can think
Yep.
about sheet music and literacy there as one means of experiencing music, but I will say viscerally, it feels different when you're singing a piece of music that you've learned through reading sheet music and you're singing through a long piece of music that you learned from someone teaching you. It is viscerally different. And there's so much that's the same, but there's so much that's different. So I
Yep.
found this to be extremely resonant. I
It gives your
loved,
music structure, but it also fences the music in
well, and also
to
the
to the
structure.
bounds of that sheet music's capabilities
Well, and here's
and
the thing,
that way of thinking about music.
and it gives it structure, but it also doesn't necessarily, because the music is structured. It's defined by when the note starts and stops. There's always rhythm. There's always harmonics. There's always, so you can have the same fully formed piece of music with or without sheet music as the initial experience of the song, and that fully determines how it physically feels in the body and cognitively in the mind. Am I getting up to that point where I jump up a sixth and that's what it looked like on the sheet music, or is it the point where I adjust the tension in my throat a certain way to make the note fit into the chord that perfect? It's fascinating to experience, and this really like unsurfaced a lot of those feelings for me. So I loved the story.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think this is a
Loved it.
really great story, and oh, it's just excellent. And to your point, the way that Nicole, his daughter, responds to him, I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, that what an incredible way of saying, like, hey, I appreciate that you're going on this journey. This does not need to drag me down into the same journey that you're going on. I don't like owe that to you. So I'm here for you, but only within what I think is healthy for me. And I thought that was
Yeah.
just the most incredible, like
So good.
healthy boundary setting is just amazing to see. Um, so yeah, very cool. I also love just Ted Chiang continues to like write these stories with interesting framing, where this is a story written by Jeffrey for us through via Ted, right? Again, similar to reading Leto's journals via Frank Herbert.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
reading the writing of the written writer, basically, which is
Yeah.
very cool. So
Yeah. I
that's
mean, come to think of it, all of these short stories have a framing. None of these are just like, here's words on a page. It's a story. Read it. Right?
is that true? Uh,
Maybe the bird one. Maybe the
no, bird
pigeon one that
ones.
comes later.
Oh, well, it's still, well, because it's the
Interesting.
message that the bird's leaving. What's expected of us is a message sent back in time. Life cycle of software objects is omniscient. We're
That's
just seeing
omniscient.
that.
And
Yeah, that's
I
like
guess merchant. No, merchant is
merchant
just
is him
Fawad
him telling
telling it to the
the
caliph.
caliph
Yeah.
that
Ted
Daisy's
loves a frame.
patent. He,
A framing
he
device.
loves a frame. Loves a
And it
frame.
works, you know, it works beautifully. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I loved this. I love this story so
I
much.
think
I
anxiety is as
texted
easy as
you
the freedom is the same is also a story. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
um I texted you earlier this week and I was like, dude, this whole story is so God Emperor coded. Like it's just dripping with God Emperor themes and ideas. Like I loved this story so much. And in particular, as interesting as Jeffrey's journey was, and as much as I liked it, it did kind of play out how I expected. I was like, okay, yeah, he's going to use remem, and there's going to be a twist. It'll reveal something, and he'll learn something. Blah blah blah. Jijingi's story really stayed with me though. Like I simply cannot stop thinking about Jijingi's story, and just the way his entire worldview, his way of thinking, his perception, his concept of the truth, a thing that we like to think is absolute and a foundation upon which we can build our beliefs, our societies, our realities, changes
Yeah.
because of this
Yeah.
tool, because
Yeah.
of writing. His idea of what truth changes, is just mind bending stuff. This is the kind of story that makes you stop dead in your tracks and go, oh my God, have I been wrong my entire life? In the assumptions I've made, right? Like being literate is like, at least for us bougie coastal New York elites, is just, is expected. You're literate, you know how to read and write. That's just like a base thing. Everyone goes to school and is expected to learn that, ideally. But to read the story and go, maybe that is not the ideal. Or if it is, maybe there's worth in some caution in assuming that reading and writing is the end all be all way of communication, memory, records, storytelling. And I love that. I love the kind of story that makes you stop dead in your tracks and go, oh my God, I need to rethink everything I've been told. And this really illustrated that for me. I also think Takako commented earlier that Ted Chiang is very good at grounding his characters within their culture and their time. And I loved that throughout the Jijingi portions, as Jijingi is learning to read and write, there are these beautiful moments in the story that illustrate the limitations of the written word in Jijingi's thought process. Like he thinks of the space between words and the structure of sentences as like the skeleton. He's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
the
Bones
sentence is
and
a
joints and
skeleton,
yeah. Yeah.
and the words in between are the bones and joints that hold the skeleton together.
Right.
That is how Jijingi thinks, because of course he doesn't know what a fucking word is. What?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I loved that, like, we got to see him learn reading and writing through his worldview and then watch it reshape that worldview. What a beautiful way to tell that story. And it really reminded me of Leto 2, and how Leto 2 is always telling Moneo about how history, or writing in his journals, about how history can never capture the whole human experience. The words can't capture Jijingi's feelings, and the histories that are written cannot express fully the truth of being Jijingi. All that in a word, my lord, right? Words contain
Right.
many things, but they do not contain the entirety of human experience, or the entirety of that human who wrote them. And so there are limitations. Like any technology, there are boundaries within which you can work, and limitations that you cannot exceed. And I loved that we illustrated that throughout Jijingi's story here. Jijingi gained and lost things in learning how to read and write. He could access objective truth, for example, because it was written down. He could organize his thoughts more efficiently, Like the concept of, let me write what I'm going to say later,
Yeah.
blowing his mind, was like really cute, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
up to this point, he's been told, oh, only things in the past are written down.
Right.
And then when the preacher's like, oh, I haven't given this sermon yet, I'm just writing it down to organize my thoughts for tomorrow. He's like, what the fuck? This is future writing?
Yeah.
Is this time travel writing? What the fuck is happening here? That's like really endearing to watch Jijingi learn that and go through that. But it also shows you like that it unlocks a superpower for him. He's like, wait a second, I can do this too. But of course, over the like disputes in the Tiv tribe, we see that he's beginning to like lose his Tiv values and beginning to lose like that
question
value
the
of what feels
chief
right.
and- yeah. Yeah.
He's questioning the chief, and he's losing those values that he held on to, and also kind of losing the concept of this. Here's my analogy that I think is helpful to think about this. If you are like a Star Wars lore nerd, or even if you're a Dune lore nerd, right? We go to the written word of the sacred texts, the original films by George Lucas, the original books by Frank Herbert, and we say, this is codified law, this is canon. You can't go against that. Fuck you if you do. And Chijinki is basically saying, like, that's what's happening, right, Chieftain? Like, this is canon, this is what was written down. And the Chieftain is saying, that's not what's best for us right now, though.
Right.
And we can decide on a different truth for this tribe and for the betterment of our people if that is required. And it is okay to do that. Revisionist history is okay in this instance, which to people born and raised within the context of the written word feels like a dirty thing, right? What? We're going to revise written history? Why?
Yeah.
I'm going to go back and scribble out who my parents were and rewrite someone else because it's necessary?
Yeah.
That feels so dirty, but that's a normal thing in Tiv culture. And because he's begun to rely on the written word, Chijingi has lost that. So he's breaking the canon, right? Chijingi's like, yeah, man, who cares what color the goddamn lightsaber is? Make it the cool color it's going to be now in this movie.
Yeah.
And, Star Wars nerds would hate Chijingi, honestly, or hate the Tiv people, because they're all about breaking the canon and doing what's best right now and what feels correct right now and sets us up for a better future. It's fascinating. I could go on and on about this. I'm kind of ranting now, but I loved this story so much. It gave me so much to think about. One of the best in this book, I think, by far.
Yeah, agreed. Oh, yeah, there's a lot to say. Even as you were talking, I was like, oh, I have like 3 more things to share. We just don't have time. There's no time to like get into the weeds. So we'll move on from there. Our 7th story is The Great Silence. This is nice and quick. Another short one. Yeah. This is told from the perspective of an unnamed Puerto Rican parrot who reflects on the common ground parrots and humanity share as he and his fellow parrots go extinct due to human activities.
Yes.
Yeah. If you felt good about the way the future's going, well, no more parrots. Now how do you feel? Now Sci-fi baby. Our feathered narrator poses some good questions about humanity's search for alien life, despite unraveled mysteries right here on Earth that we seem to be ignoring. And the story is really short. I mean, it's kind of jumping. It's these little paragraphs from thought to thought. I would like to think that the cadence of the paragraphs feeling kind of unusual is giving us kind of a look into how he's thinking, how the parrot's cognitive like process works, where you're thinking in these like chunks of really brilliant thought.
Yeah.
But there's some really great quotes throughout. I enjoyed this one quite a bit. Quote, "Human activity has brought my kind to the brink of extinction, but I don't blame them for it. They didn't do it maliciously. They just weren't paying attention." End quote. Which is both very nice of the parrot not to be too angry at us, but also heartbreaking. My God, what a condemnation. Truly. That we're just oblivious and we're just stomping on anthills, having no awareness of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And the story ends with the conclusion foregone. The parrots will go extinct. Their incredible culture, their language, their mythology, the stories they tell, even the fact that they are the intelligent life that they are, will be lost. And that's just the nature of humanity's blind spots. And of course, our narrator leaves us with a final message, quote, "You be good. I love you." End quote. Abu.
Beautiful.
What did you think?
For once on today's recording, I don't have a lot to say here. I think this is a simple, very sweet story told in Ted Chiang's lovely, poetic prose.
Yeah.
It's a good one. Not one of the best in this book, but I think it's a nice story that left me feeling a little bit sad, a little bit hopeful, and quite contemplative, which most of these stories left me. I don't have a ton to say. What about you?
Same. I mean, surprising nobody. I liked this story a lot. And ultimately, same. Quietly sad. I appreciated that it wasn't like mean or melodramatic. I think oftentimes like stories can get a little heavy-handed if you're talking about conservation and extinction and things like that, and it can be like very brandishing the retaliatory punishment. I don't know. This was very gentle, and I appreciated that. Yeah. It almost made it more effective because I was so disarmed by its tone. I do think that in hundreds of years, we're going to look back on like the fact that we eat octopuses, and I think we're going to be like, wow, we really shouldn't. They're so
Yeah.
smart. We barely understand their intelligence. Their intelligence is fully developed separately from us. I do think that there's quite a bit of resonance in the way that, in hindsight, we're going to realize that we're doing quite a bit wrong right now. But that's the story.
Right. And the sad part of this story is like, in many cases, it will be too late.
Yeah.
We will have lost the octopus by the time we realize we shouldn't have been eating them the whole
Right.
time.
Right.
Lovely little
Yep.
story. Okay, story number 8. Our penultimate short story takes place in a world where science directly supports creationism. Man, I fucking love this one too.
This
Jesus.
is great. Yeah.
This is so good. The examples given in the story for how science supports creationism is that tree rings, which indicate years of life for trees, if you go back far enough, eventually the rings stop, and there's just a perfectly flat center, implying that the trees were just kind of popped into existence at some point in their history. There are also primordial human remains that have been discovered that don't have navels, implying that they were never birthed, that they all too just popped into existence by God at some point. Thus, science in this world supports and is like almost entirely based on creationism, on proving the fact that this is God's work that we exist in. Very interesting perspective. The story basically follows an archaeologist, Dorothea Morel, whose faith over the course of the tale is shaken when an astronomer discovers that Earth is actually not the center of this universe,
Insane.
suggesting
Incredible. Yeah.
that humanity may thus not be the center of God's focus, and maybe we are not God's mission. We're just a byproduct of whatever experiment is actually happening over there. This shakes Dorothea to her core. This is going to be a bombshell report that comes out. It's going to shake the scientific community, the religious community, and things are looking rough. We're on shaky ground all of a sudden. But this revelation does force Dorothea to confront this existential crisis that she now faces and really ask the deep questions about human history and her own life. If we are not special, if we are not the center of God's attention, what is the purpose of our lives? Really beautiful stuff. What did you think of this story?
Oh, I mean, I love this story so goddamn much. This, to spoil power ranking a bit, this makes my top 3.
Nice.
The framing is brilliant. Again, I think Ted will frame a story in a way that I'm like, are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to
I
like
know.
framing this story as like nightly prayers to God and one letter to
So
her
good.
sister or her cousin, and then it's like it's incredible, and it serves it's not just fun, it's not just cool, it's not just creative, it serves the narrative really, really beautifully, because we also see, I don't know if you noticed, but one of her last prayers to God doesn't end with amen. She's just like, I'm shaken, I don't know what to do.
Right. Yeah,
And
the one
that's
where
the
she's
end of
really
the,
shaken. Yeah.
and that's the end, and it's like, wow, to show how the structure itself is suffering because of how she's feeling as the narrator. It's unbelievable. It's great. I love it. This also had some like really banger quotes, and on the topic of the like Yosemite Cathedral being built at great expense to the church, and they're all looking for donations to get this job done. Dorothea wonders at whether it's a good use of church money in the modern era. And I thought this quote was so beautiful. Quote, "For me, science is the true modern cathedral, an edifice of knowledge, every bit as majestic as anything made of stone. It fulfills all the goals that Yosemite Cathedral does and more. And I wish more people appreciated that." End quote. Which I
Wow.
thought was really beautiful. I think, when I've talked to my friends who are theists, who believe in God, and who are also scientists and physicists, and they believe in, for them, many of them, I don't want to put words in their mouths, but as they've explained to me, their study of the world is an embodiment of the curiosity and the knowledge that God gave them. And it's this sort of like so then if we treat human scientific knowledge, the entire body of what we've discovered about this incredible universe we've been given, if we treat that as this ultimate cathedral that we're building in the glory of God, like that's so cool. I love that so
Ugh.
much. And I can't help but think like, yeah, if a deity gave us all of this intellectual curiosity and this desire to understand ourselves and to tell these stories about ourselves that get more and more complex the more we learn, I think that would be approved of. And I think that's really beautiful. So anyway,
Yeah.
I loved this story. I've thought about this story a lot. I like this alternative what if kind of idea of you're finding clams that don't have the concentric rings from the moment that they were born to the moment, you're finding like all these
Yeah.
little bits of evidence, but then heliocentrism for a different fucking planet. It's like, oh, and can you imagine on that planet the speed of light is always the same? It's like, oh shit, yeah, true. Oh man, it's so good. Anyway, I loved it. I think it's incredible.
I loved it.
What about you? What did you think of this one?
Same, ditto. I mean, I was incredibly moved by this story. I loved the ideas that it was exploring, right? The big questions once again being tackled here by Ted, finding your purpose in life, human curiosity, as you just talked about, celebrating it, recognizing its innate nature. And I really liked the warning in this story of viewing the universe through this like anthropocentric, Jesus Christ. Should have used smaller words. Anthropocentric lens.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
The dangers of viewing the universe through an anthropocentric lens, like to say we are the center of God's focus and we, humanity, are the center of the universe, and thus that is where our purpose lies. This is all part of that singular plan that revolves around us. Having that shattered and what that does to society and to people on a personal level, and just that warning, like it's not all about us. It's not all about you, So fucking chill.
Yeah.
Take it easy. I think that's a very God Emperor idea to revisit this again. Like there are limits to studying the universe as if it is a machine operating based on the laws of cause and effect, right?
Right.
Like we humanity are the effect of God, who is the cause. God caused us to happen, and we are the effect, and we are that focus. Or relying on the base assumption that things in the universe happen because of other things, that it has to be that way. Frank and Leto, too, in those stories argued, like, doesn't always have to be that way. And in fact, you're limiting yourself by thinking of it in only those terms. I think here we're seeing a similar warning. You're limiting yourself in thinking that there is a plan, that God has a plan, and that we all, like puzzle pieces, fit neatly into it. That might be a comforting thought to some, but chaos does exist. And Dorothea perhaps here is realizing slowly that maybe there's no plan. Maybe we are random, this byproduct of random chance. And Frank Herbert, the Bene Gesserit, like many of those stories would argue, embrace the chaos. It's okay.
Yeah.
There is no godly vision for humanity, Dorothea. And you know what? Crazy thought, but that's fine. You're still here. You're still doing your work. And in fact, that's the conclusion that Dorothea comes to, which I really appreciated, because this story could have gone in a very Black Mirror direction and ended with like Dorothea's like total breakdown, society collapsing. Oh no, dark, edgy, it's all over. Instead, much like many of these stories, even the darkness, we see the light within the darkness of what's taking place. She finds meaning here. I want to share one of the last things she says in one of her final prayers. Quote, "If humanity is not the reason for which the universe was made, I still wish to understand the way it operates. We human beings may not be the answer to the question why, but I will keep looking for the answer to how. The search is my purpose, not because you chose it for me, Lord, but because I chose it for myself. Amen."
Bars!
End quote. Mic drop.
Oh, shit. Oh, it's
Dorothea!
So good. Dorothea. Man,
I want her to stomp on my face.
All right. Yeah. Hell yeah.
So I love that, just the empowering message there, the fact that even though her faith is shaken, her faith in herself is in fact strengthened. And she, rather than breaking down, has found a way to build herself up even stronger and to continue her pursuit. Um, Beautiful. Just beautiful all around. I love this. This would have been in my top three, but I dare not put it in top four. It's like 3.5 for me. It missed my top three.
I appreciate it also. She talked about how like if you look back in this like God and we are God's focus and everything, the the one miracle that existed, the one true miracle that existed was his choice to create the universe. And because of that, it was the only moment that wasn't mechanical. It was the only moment that didn't have a preceding cause. This was an effect without a cause. And that's miraculous about it. But if God is entirely focused on this other planet that's not here, that means every choice by every person on this planet is miraculous. And there's like a new
Is a miracle.
reframing is a
Oh,
miracle. And I thought that was so beautiful. It's like
God.
it's excellent. So yeah, I'm right there with you. The fact that
So
it didn't
good.
become this despondent thing, and also weirdly was one of the few stories where it's like, oh yeah, humans do have agency, and that's something to celebrate and to be really to relish in a way
Yeah.
that I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it. Okay, well, that carries us to our final story. Only 2.5 hours in, not bad. Anxiety
Jesus
is the
Christ.
dizziness of freedom. So this is the requisite parallel universe story. No sci-fi story collection would be complete without it. And this is a concept Ted Chiang tackles. In a near future world, prisms are developed. This is a product that when you push a button, either a blue light or a red light turns on. It's determined randomly. And in one reality, the red light turns on, in the other reality, a blue light turns on. And that is the inciting quantum moment that splits off two parallel universes, where the only difference is
Right.
which light went on, which light went off. Now, that being
That's right.
said, that will then change everything. Eventually, even just the light neurons, the light that the photons being released changes full global weather patterns in a matter of months, and ultimately, even genetics, what child is born, what the temperature that day determines the sex of the child. There's all sorts of crazy things that happen. So it turns out 5 years, 6 years after that inciting button press, you've got fully different realities. So if you
Yep.
are going into a big job interview and you want to know whether or not you got it in every reality, you can push that button, you know, 2 months before your job interview. Then a few months after that, there are ways of communicating between the two timelines. The prism allows you to actually exchange information with that other reality. Very, very
Yeah.
cool. Basically allowing people, this is like a what if, people can communicate with alternative versions of themselves in branching timelines, and of course
Yeah.
all of the human conundrums that come out of that possibility. Now
Juicy.
this so juicy. The story primarily follows, and again, by the way, this is where lesser authors would fail and focus too much on the technology. This is where Ted really laser focuses on humans and human desires to understand cause and effect, and did I make the right choice? That fear
Right.
that we all have, explored ad infinitum, or whatever, however you say that word. Uh, Now, the story follows primarily Natasha, Morrow, and Dana as they grapple with the realities of this technology. Natasha, and Morrow are con artists who work at a company that basically rents out prisms to people. And they basically con an old lady into giving up a bunch of money. And they also identify someone who has a prism that's going to be worth a lot of money for a celebrity whose husband died in a car accident, but has a prism in which that alternate reality, the husband's alive. So their goal is to con them to basically cooperate with their para selves in order to make a ton of money. And even Dana, who is the therapist leading this support group for people who struggle with prisms, she herself struggles with her own life choices and wonders about the choices she's made and her responsibility for the way things turn out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, eventually, one of Morrow's cons catches up with him. He gets shot and killed. Natasha opens up in one of Dana's support group sessions about Morrow's death, and the two connect over a discussion of personal choice and responsibility. Nat then has to finish Morrow's big final con on her own, goes to Los Angeles to convince a celebrity to buy the prism, but instead she decides to just give it for free. It's kind of a nice little moment ending of
really
her
touching.
story. And to thank Dana, Nat finds a bunch of prisms where Dana and her childhood friend Vanessa have different outcomes from a drug incident. And Dana realizes that she doesn't need to feel guilty for how someone else's life turned out anymore. And again,
Yeah.
recognizing relationships that can be abusive and people who manipulate you and your feelings of guilt to feel a certain way and act a certain way. Really complex story overall. You know, a lot of moving pieces. And again, one of the few stories in this book that isn't framed as someone telling you a story. But what do you think, Abu? What do you think of this final story in the collection?
I had a lot of fun with this one. I think it's another, as you pointed out, it's another example of how great Ted is at examining the very human realities of new technology, how it affects us socially, personally, economically, emotionally, all the facets of the technology rather than the technology itself. And the way Ted Chiang is able to just like weave that into his stories. The prisms are central to this story. The story can't exist without the prisms, but it is not about the prisms. It is about the people using the prisms.
Yeah.
In particular, I really loved how this story handled the question of how much we value our personal choices, how much those matter, with chaos and randomness, basically. Butterfly effect, which is central to the idea of the prisms, right? A divergent path will eventually start diverging dramatically because of the compounding interest of differences, minuscule differences that begin to add up over time. The weather being 2 degrees off this day could have a wild ripple effect to something that happens 20 years from now. That effect is kind of key to how the prisms operate. And because of that effect, actually, you can't use a prism as a point of comparison. Or at least it loses its value as a point of comparison over time because of these divergences. But we see, for example, how Lyle, the support group member who's struggling with prism use, still goes on this like really awkward date with a girl that he knows his paraself is happily dating because he thinks he deserves that too, or he thinks like it'll work out for him too because
she's
it
compatible.
Worked out for the other me.
She's single. I'm single.
We're compatible.
Yeah,
Look how happy we are in that reality.
Yeah,
I can have that happiness here as well, or even I deserve that happiness here as well because my other version has it. And you read that. At least I read that, and I was like, bro, what are you thinking? This was never going to work. What are you doing? But the reality is we do this all the time, right? We know intellectually that, like, for example, if you're an ambitious person, it's not a race. Being successful is not a zero-sum game. Someone else's success does not mean you've lost. You're running your own race. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
Like, we know all of those things intellectually, but you can bet your ass I'm comparing myself to people that are more successful than me all the time. Constantly. Yeah. I'm constantly making myself feel bad about myself by doing that.
Yeah, it's great.
And Lyle is doing the same thing. And like what adds to this, the prism element of all of this is who better to compare yourself to than yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
In another timeline, because you don't even get to say like, oh, Childish Gambino is just like so handsome and musically talented. That's why he's better than me. I just am not that. Yeah. I could never be that. But if other Abu is like best friends with Childish Gambino and like constantly is putting out albums with Childish Gambino and is musically talented,
featured on This Is America. It's crazy. It's great.
What fucking excuse do I have now? What's happening here?
That's so funny.
It's brilliant. Like at first you're like, Lyle, you dumbass. But then I paused and was like, this is me.
Yeah.
I would also be like, why can't I date that girl? It's really beautifully done. at first Lyle is pathetic, but then slowly you become very empathetic to his situation. And there's a couple of other examples like that throughout the book too,
Right. Right.
throughout this short story. And you know, I think what I really appreciate about this story is that Ted Chiang avoids a very common pitfall in sci-fi. I read a lot of sci-fi. A lot of sci-fi stories can, a lot of sci-fi stories are tempted to just lean into the grim dark, to be like, look how horrible prisms are, and look what devastation they've reaped on humanity. This is my warning to you. Don't fuck with parallel timelines.
Right. Right. Right.
Instead, Ted is like, there's good here too, man. Like, I don't know. Who am I to say that prisms are
Sports
just
betting, celebrity
the
gossip,
worst?
like yeah, it's like hobbies have changed, but it's fine. It's
It's
like
being used as well, but also at the end we see how it's there's a very personal evolution for Natasha and Dana as well because of prisms. Natasha witnesses a horrible death. You know, Morrow, like friend in quotations, but whatever, her like con artist partner, but then is able to have this very beautiful. She makes this very beautiful decision with a celebrity where she's like, "There's an objective good that can be done here. Someone is grieving. I can give them for free a tool that will help them work through that grief, to reconnect with someone they loved." That is an objective good the prism can do. Dana is able to let go of her guilt and grow as a person and recognize her relationship and friendship with Vanessa is toxic and she's being used because of prisms.
right, right.
And so there are objective goods being used. So there are objective goods being done with this technology as well. So I love that all throughout all 9 of these stories, actually, Ted is able to avoid that temptation to be so prescriptive, to
Yeah.
say, this is bad, this is grim dark, don't do it.
Yeah.
And I think that is, I will say, as much as I love Black Mirror, we've been referencing it a lot today. One of my good friends who I respect very much, an amazing filmmaker, hates Black Mirror, like constantly argues with me about Black Mirror because he's like, it's just so grim dark, man. Like every takeaway in Black Mirror is like, what if it got as bad as it could possibly get? And to some extent, I get it. That's valid. I don't
For
think
sure.
every Black Mirror episode is like that. The best ones are to actually manage to avoid that. But I get it. A lot of Black Mirror is like, what if everything was bad all the time? Isn't it scary?
Yeah.
And all throughout these short stories, I really want to hand it to Ted for being able to avoid that temptation and to be able to look at things with nuance.
Yeah. Yeah. 1000%.
Wow, I just talked for so long. I'm so sorry. What did you think of this short story as we wrap up?
No, it's great. Again, I think this is one of those stories that also, because it goes on a little bit longer, I didn't really feel it have its hooks in me, and reading it felt a little bit like at the tail end of this book, after so many great standout stories, I think of it as a little bit lower in the bunch if I were to
Yeah.
rank them all. But overall, it's so excellent. I love the way we get these details of Dana and Nat's perspectives. You know, Nat notices this moment that Dana's affected by someone says what they say. Meanwhile, Dana notices that Nat's always looking to Lyle. So we get this like tease out of what people know and when they know it, which I really appreciate. You know, I love the kind of hard sci-fi techno talk, but these human stakes at the heart of everything. And
Yeah.
I also found myself like, one of the first conversations that Dana has with one of her clients is around, would knowing what your paraself is doing change how you behave moving forward? And similarly with, I think the guy named Jeff, I think his name was, or no, Jorge comes in and is like, well, I like vandalized my boss's car, but my paraselves didn't. And she's like, okay, do you think that negates what you did? And he goes, no, but it reflects on who I am. And she's like, yeah.
I'm absolved of guilt because I don't do this in any other timeline. So I'm still a good person.
Yeah. It's like, percentage wise, I'm not as violent as maybe that seems. And it's like, right. But okay, sure. You know, and so I really appreciate the kind of ways that this is shown. But I also think this, like, oftentimes people want more data or more answers because they hope it'll change the way they behave. But ultimately, the change in behavior is something that you just have. And you can choose not to be violent, whether or not you perceive yourself as violent. It's not a foregone conclusion. And oftentimes people will treat, even if it's like, well, horoscope wise, I'm an Aries, so I'm combative. And that's the end of that decision. And I'm just going to be that way forever. And it's like, or maybe that's the beginning of the journey. And that's the work you put in. And that's the, if you find out your paraself is super violent and killed a bunch of people, yeah, maybe that affects what you do tomorrow. And you make sure that you work on these things that apparently are not so far off. But ultimately, what is your identity outside of, I love it. And again, I think the questions and the answers it doesn't provide, but the questions it asks, great time.
Great.
Again, even though it's lower on the list, if I were to rank all of the stories, I still think this is head and shoulders above so many other authors. It's incredible.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, those are the 9 short stories in this amazing book. We are honestly going on for what feels like 10 hours. So how about we wrap up rapid fire style? Let's rattle off our top 3.
Yeah, let's do it.
What are your 3 favorite stories from these 9?
Okay. Number 3 for me, Omphalos.
Love it.
The what if building sci-fi story of creationism, science point story. Fucking awesome. I think about this story all the time, and that search for meaning I think is super beautiful. 2, Exhalation. I want to say, I wanted to put this as number 1, but spoiler, you put it as number 1, so I didn't want us to both have the same number 1. So Exhalation. This story gives the book its name, and for good reason. It's so cool. It's unbelievably cool. And it does a great job of balancing existential reactions that come from broad scope scientific discoveries. So Exhalation, number 2. Number 1, my number 1 story for this book, Truth of Fact, Truth of Feeling, or whatever it's called.
Let's do it.
This story is so much more impactful on a second read through. I loved the investigation of cognition, the role of language, technology. How does technology affect how we think and perceive ourselves? And storytelling, the dual storytelling is all very cool. I love that story. And I also wanted to, because I don't know if we, if our listeners love this, maybe we'll talk about more Ted Chiang in the future. But in case we don't, I also wanted to give an honorable shout out to a story that's not in this collection. Tower of Babylon is so fucking great. Ted just broadly is on a different level with so many of his ideas and his executions.
For real.
I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk about this book, and I hope people enjoyed as well. So those are my rankings. Omphalos, number 3, Exhalation, number 2, Truth of Fact, Truth of Feeling, number 1. What about you? What are your 3, your top 3?
Mine are very similar. Truth of Fact, Truth of Feeling falls at number 3 for me. Loved it. I already gushed about it earlier. Number 2, The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate.
Probably 4.
I just love the setting.
Yeah,
I love the like mythological Arabian Nights fantasy nature of a story that's centered around time travel. I love its message. So good. Number 2 for me. Number 1, Exhalation. Just
easy.
My God.
Yeah.
An easy pick. That's a fucking home run of a story. I loved it. So good. Obviously, honorable mention to Omphalos, which at first I put on here and then I erased, and then I was really waffling on that back and forth. But we stated this earlier, but to really emphasize this point, I truly think even the I truly think Ted Chiang is like the GOAT. And even his mediocre writing, even his worst writing is like better than what other authors will spend a lifetime of writing trying to achieve. It's wild. As you said, like Tower of Babylon, his other short stories, Ted is just operating on like a totally different fucking plane of existence than other contemporary sci-fi authors. It's unreal.
Yeah.
How creative and how well crafted these stories are. And what's absolutely, utterly shocking and honestly destroyed my self-esteem is when I Googled him, I learned that writing is just a fucking hobby.
Oh my God.
He has a full-time job at Microsoft. He works like a regular dude's 9 to 5, 40 hours a week at a tech company and just writes this shit on the side. Wild. Writing one of these stories would take me a lifetime of thinking. and Ted is just like doing this on the weekends on a trip to the park or whatever. Wild stuff to me. As an excuse to rewatch Arrival, I was like, this is homework. I'm working, Leo. Bill me for the hours.
Yeah.
I rewatched Arrival in preparation for this episode, which is based on a different Ted Chiang story in his other short story collection. And honestly, much like Life Cycle of Software Instruments or whatever, like I watched that movie 10 years ago. I liked it a lot, but it didn't stay with me. I watched it again like 2 weeks ago, wept. Like just, it destroyed me. It hit me on a whole other level. And it's masters like Denis Villeneuve and Ted Chiang combining forces. We are so blessed to get a movie like Arrival. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend. Ted is an icon. He's iconic, dare I say. And the short story collection is amazing. And I'm also very glad that we got to really gush about it. This was so fun, Leo.
Agreed. Yeah. And again, ultimately, like when it comes down to the brass tacks, like authors are exploring truth through their worlds. And I think, like Frank, Ted very clearly has things he wants to communicate through his stories and does so masterfully. And I think when we're looking at the kind of common DNA between like Dune and all of the Dune books and Ted's stories, they're so neighbors. They are in the same aisle in Trader Joe's where they are, we're reading like this Leto to Atreides and Darius Balat and his journals. All of that's fairly heavy-handed. Frank was basically a political speaker, but I see a lot of the same stuff in Ted's stories. And I don't know Ted, but I feel like I know Ted. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And once we sent him our voice message, I think we'll get to finally talk to him and tell him how much we love him.
Yeah. If any of our listeners have, like, if you're a stone's throw from Ted, tell him about us. We want to talk to him so badly.
So
has he read Dune? Does he like Dune? If he doesn't like Dune, maybe not, because that would be rough. But if he likes Dune, let's talk.
Yeah,
let's talk Ted.
Oh, so exciting.
Okay. Well,
let's wrap it up there. Wow, this is one of the longest episodes we've recorded in a while. Gosh, nearly as long as our Dune movie review episodes. Amazing.
Good Lord.
Okay. A couple of quick reminders before we let you go, dear listener. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, especially the folks who have stuck around on the live stream. There are two great ways to support this show and help us continue to do what we do. One is to become a patron, patreon.com/GomJabbar. You get a bunch of goodies. You get ad-free episodes, behind-the-scenes stuff, and early access to book clubs. The second best way is to check out our merch store, GomJabbarShop.com. Get yourself something cute to wear to the beach this summer. GomJabbarShop.com. Dune-themed merch. Check it out. Those links are in the show notes below.
Indeed. Also, we love to hear from you. So email us, gomjabbarpodcast@gmail.com. Send us your questions, your comments, your concerns. Also, this is a bit of an experiment, right? We've talked about the science fiction miniseries. We talked about the 84 Lynch movie. These are things that are Dune related, but not exactly Dune. This is less Dune related than almost anything else we've talked about. Even Asimov had the connective DNA.
Much more Dune related. Yeah.
Much more Dune related. So I would say, let us know in particular. Did you enjoy this? If not, why? If so, why? We want to know. Ultimately, we take your feedback very, very seriously. So if you have any feedback about today's episode, by all means, let us know. gomjabbarpodcast@gmail.com. We read every email and we respond in 1 to 2 or 3 business years. So always happy to get a word from you.
Yeah. And to be clear, not every year is a business year. So don't be counting that like 1, 2, 3.
Last year was
sometimes
not a business
it's like
year,
one,
for instance.
Skip a one.
Yeah,
two,
yeah. It's like leap years,
more.
but way less predictable. Yeah.
Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is always one step beyond logic, so help spread the word of Muad'Dib and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. And of course, we are also on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, whoever controls the podcast controls every parallel universe.
Oh my God.
we'll see you on the golden path.
Oh, a different outro. That's fun.
Ooh, a para outro, some might say.
Whoa.
Ah, gosh, wow, what a marathon. That was great. Super fun. And thank you, folks. Norma, Senva, thank you so much.
Takako.
Takako for hanging out
Everybody.
with us for so long.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
I gotta
That's
eat
it.
lunch. I'm so hungry.
I'm like really hungry and out of steam. I actually have to record Murderbot in like 10 minutes. So
You've
that's
got
happening
this.
for the other podcast. I got this. I can do it. All right. Thank you so much, gang, for hanging out.
Love you all.
And
Have a
we
great
will
day.
see you. We'll see you on Discord, and we'll see you at the next stream. Have a great one.
See you around. Take care, folks.
Bye.